1 for in Arabic, and channel 2 will be translation into English if you need that. Some of our questions today will be answered in Arabic, and if you wish to have the translation, you can please feel free to use the headsets. Today we're going to be looking at regional, national, international developments around how we regulate, create, develop policy, and manage the legal frameworks across the wonderful sphere that is aviation. And sitting with me today, I have some wonderfully talented gentlemen. Starting here on my left is Jamie Binder. He is a secretary of the Latin Civil Aviation Commission. He has arrived here after some 30-odd hours of flying, so thank you for joining us. Next to him is Engineer Manar. He is a Director General of the Arab Civil Aviation Organization, ACAO. Thank you. And sitting opposite me is Mr. Rajab, who is the Executive Vice President of the Air Transport and International Cooperation, part of GACA. Next to him is Dr. Alessio Quaranta, the Director General of the Italian Civil Aviation Authority. And finally, on my right is Stephen Chance, the Head of Asset Finance at Clifford Chance in the UAE. So thank you, gentlemen. Can we give them a round of applause for being here? Thank you. It's not my fault. Okay, the first question that I would like to open it up for our discussions looks at some trends that we have in aviation at the moment that you are seeing in your regions and the areas that you are looking after. And the first question is around what strategies do you have for your regions to evolve as a vibrant, safe aviation destination and hub? Open it up to you. Mr. Rajab.
Thank you, Simon, for this important question. Please allow me first to welcome all my colleagues here. Welcome to Saudi Arabia, and it's great to see again some of you. This wonderful event will not be achieved, this tremendous achievements and good participant without the commitment that comes from you. So thank you so much for coming and joining us in Saudi Arabia today. Coming back to your question, Simon, I think there have been a lot of initiatives, there have been a lot of roadmaps, there have been a lot of work in progress that we are seeing today from Saudi Arabia, from United Arab Emirates, and other countries in the region, here in Middle East. And I believe personally that will complement each other. If you look at the national strategy in Saudi Arabia that was launched 2 years ago, that will put Saudi Arabia back to the map, that will put Saudi Arabia number one on the aviation, will reach to 330 million passengers, will reach to 250 destinations by 2030. And I believe that going to stimulate other hubs within the region. We are seeing also a massive developments in Oman and Kuwait, Qatar as well. We just heard the announcement of one of the biggest airports or the biggest airports in history in Dubai. So we believe this region needs to are going to complement each other, and we will see a whole aviation region and a whole aviation hub within the next 10 years.
Excellent, thank you. And
yeah, if I may add something, of course, luckily I can say COVID-19 is under our shoulder, so we should concentrate our effort in front of the future. And as far as I know, at least in my region, in Europe, we are in front of a huge increase of traffic, and we need to be well prepared in order to accomplish with it. In principle, I think we should try to develop as much as we can new infrastructure in order to be in a position to cope with the traffic demand. Last year in Europe, we have already recovered 2019 figures, and really expect next summer a big explosion of the traffic in my region. That is why I think we should try to concentrate our effort in trying to program new infrastructure, of course, in a way to be, as much as we're saying, compatible with the environment under many, many perspectives. But I think if we want to really win this challenge, we need to invest, invest, and invest. I think the key words will be three of them, of course: technology, innovation, and digitalization. If we will be in a position to cope with these three aspects, I think we will win. Last figures we have in front of us are indicating to us that by 2040 we will have, at least in Europe, at least 50% of the traffic in addition with respect to 2019, I mean in terms of movement. Imagine what could be in terms of number of passengers.
And you touched there on digitalization. How are you finding AI coming into the aviation operation area? There's many routes we could take AI down, but overall, how are you finding that in terms of the digital aspects of people, of the passengers?
Well, I think it will be essential. By the way, as you know, in Europe, we decided to invest a lot in digitalization and in aviation intelligence and artificial intelligence. A lot of funding coming from European Commission is addressed to develop those aspects. And of course, we are trying to, let's say, fine-tune all the activities we need to perform in all the domain and subdomain. Imagine what could be the application of artificial intelligence applied to ATM or ANS systems. Of course, it will improve the way of flying. It will let our sector to be more safe and more secure. And of course, we need to work a lot on it because sometimes, I'm talking as a regulator, of course, not sometimes, very often, unfortunately, technology runs faster than regulation.
If you absolutely. And Jamie, are you seeing anything coming out of South America that would also impact trends in aviation?
Yes, of course. First of all, I will say thank you very much for having us, and I really appreciate to be here. It's such an honor speaking, surrounded by experts in this beautiful city. Let me say something regarding Latin American and the Caribbean countries. As you know, we have a wonderful geography. We are surrounded by hills, mountains in the hinterlands, and there are beautiful small islands in the Caribbean. But in Latin America, we have lack of infrastructure. There are not railways or ground transportation, and then the aviation sector is essential. But the paradox is that in our region, we represent more or less 6 or 8% of the global air traffic. The good news is there is a huge room for improving. But what that means exactly? More than 80% of the air traffic is in other regions in the world, not in Latin America and the Caribbean countries. And within our sector, in the aviation, in our region, there are a lack of competition as well. And thinking about our strategy, of course, in LACAC, we have a strategy plan. We have our anniversary last year in Lima, Peru. We celebrate 50 years in our organization. And we have a Lima Declaration. This is a commitment in the political level. And we commit several things. In our webpage, you can find the declaration. Let me highlight just 2 things. For the next 10 years, we will improve air transport for passengers, and at the same time, we will improve air transport for cargo. For passengers, we already have an open skies agreement. Not all of our countries follow this open skies approach, but there are several countries that they sign this open skies agreement. On the other hand, last year, we signed an MOU that liberalized cargo up to 7 freedom. We are talking about a large market. We have 11 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean that they signed this MOU. This is an MOU that is a complement for other instruments, such like other bilateral agreements or multilateral agreements. It's complementary, but liberalized cargo up to the 7th freedom. And this is really good for us because we are not reinventing the fire here. We are following a successful initiative that already happened, for instance, in Europe. Europe in the 90s liberalized the market, and that produced new business models like the low-cost carriers, and we're looking for that in Latin America. And if we obtain more competition, the ticket will decrease, the price of the tickets will decrease, and the demand will increase, and that will produce more pressure in our infrastructure, in investing in technology, and so on. And we believe that this is the first step that we should done to improve our sector.
Perfect, thank you. And Engineer Mana, how are you finding strategies in your region developing?
Thank you very much, Simon, for this question, and it's a great pleasure for me to take part of this session. Good afternoon to all of us. First of all, I would like to recall that during the COVID-19 crisis, the most impacted sector was the air transport. And under the umbrella of International Civil Aviation Organization, where we were following the evolution of the traffic, and we made some forecasts for the, the recovery, if I may say. We put 3 scenarios, and I believe that now we are in the optimistic one. But we were thinking that the optimistic one is to reach the volume of the traffic that we had before the COVID-19. And the worst one was for 27. And I think it's good signal for the sector. It is a mature sector that can face many, many crises as it was in the past. And specifically for the Arab region, the growth rate is, I think, the highest one in the world. The contribution to the GDP of the Arab countries is the double of the world average. So it is important for our Arab economies. Most of the Arab countries, they have the strategies for 2003 and beyond, 30 and beyond. But also at the level of our organization, we have a strategy for, supporting the Arab strategies. And I think from the point of view of the infrastructure, the capacities, we have no problem. Maybe we may have some problems with the availability of aircrafts. As our colleague, Mr. Alessio, he said that forecasts made by the professionals, especially Boeing and Airbus, for the region. It expects to have more than the double of the fleet we have now in the Arab region, which means that it will be a huge development in the region. And I think our countries, in their strategy, they are ready to invest in the sector. We had the World Cup in Qatar. It was an opportunity to invest for the future. We will have it in Morocco, after Morocco in Saudi Arabia, and huge projects to develop all the economy sectors. And I think, and also, as I said, as Arab Civil Aviation Organization, we are trying to create that framework for coordination of the strategies between the Arab countries. We share common worries, common goals also.
Excellent, thank you. And you've brought up an excellent point about the massive amount of growth within aviation and the assets being aircraft that are required. And we heard recently, earlier today, about the work that Riyadh Air are wanting to do, which then brings me over more to you, Stephen. How do you find the Cape Town Convention could then impact such high-value aviation assets. And are there any challenges around this that you see?
Yes, so again, thank you for the invitation to speak today. The Cape Town Convention has really had a huge impact across the global aviation sector. And there are a number of challenges which we can speak to as well. I know, for example, the team at Riyadh Air is super keen to get this implemented because the intention behind it as an international treaty is to provide protection to the interests and rights of banks and of investors in the aircraft that they're financing for the airlines. Now, I think the natural conclusion for that is that, well, in that case, it benefits the banks and it benefits the investors. Whereas in actual fact, it really benefits the airlines in their growth because the proper implementation of the Cape Town Convention, the proper procedures being run around the filing of a IDERA, which essentially is just a very simple piece of paper which gives a bank or an investor the right to deregister the aircraft in the circumstance where things go wrong. I'm conscious sat here as a lawyer always talking about things going wrong, but that's how it is. But that provides the banks, in particular when funding, with the ability to take the view that actually this is a very secure jurisdiction. In the event that one of the airlines were to have financial difficulties and the need to repossess an aircraft were to occur, then in addition to kind of getting their hands on the metal, which is something which again, the courts in countries which have signed and properly implemented Cape Town, then should give back to an order to be returned to the airline, but also that the aircraft will be quickly deregistered, and therefore the investor and the banks can go and take their valuable asset and lease it elsewhere. So that's kind of number one benefit for them. And of course, then the consequence of that is that their financing costs of the airlines are typically less because the banks can take the view that the risk is less, so margins come down. And also in the case of, say, any financing which is backed by export credit agencies, again, there is a regime in place which gives a discount on the premium that is payable for the insurance policies. So again, that cost is typically passed on to the airline. So any reduction in those costs is a benefit to the airline. So to kind of complete the loop there, it really is in the interest of the airline to have this regime in place and properly implemented in each jurisdiction. In terms of challenges, it's a complex area because as a starting point, it's kind of typically in an insolvency or in a dispute. No one really likes talking about that, that potential risk at the end of a transaction. What we have seen, some countries have signed and ratified the Cape Town Convention, but then haven't made the necessary adaptations of local law, which means that there's then a conflict in the courts. In terms of recent experience, an Indian airline Go First went insolvent last year. India is a country which has signed the Cape Town Convention, but hasn't not been properly implemented. And there was then a period of a number of months where the lessors faced a lot of uncertainty about whether or not they get their aircraft back. The courts quite recently actually ordered that they will be deregistered and given back. So that has played out quite well. But that's the kind of area where there can be difficulties. And there are also challenges just from a legal perspective. So if you look even at the European Union, the countries within the EU, so although the EU has signed the convention, the individual states haven't. And a lot of that comes down to a country will take the view we have a sophisticated legal system, we have great court system, why would we go and sign this international treaty? We have a great system already. But that can still lead to difficulties and anomalies where you can still be stuck in a local insolvency regime. And as an owner or a bank, it can be frustrating that things are taking longer than they would do were the Cape Town Treaty actually properly implemented.
Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree with him. First of all, I think in general, having the same rules applicable everywhere, it could be considered, of course, an add value to the system, no matter of that. And in the sense that I'd really urge all states to ratify the convention as soon as possible, including my country, where the ratification process of the Cape Town Convention is still pending. But at the same time, I think we should investigate ourselves why this convention has not been completely ratified in all parts of the world. And I can say something as far as Europe is concerned. In Europe, in my region, not all countries have ratified yet the convention, probably for two reasons. First of all, as you told before, because sometimes it's difficult to, let's say, being compatible with the convention being compatible with all national judicial systems. In my country, for instance, we have a special problem related with the Ministry of Justice, because in order to ratify the convention, we need to completely update our civil code, and sometimes it's difficult to do it properly, at least in a proper time. But there is also another reason that could, I don't want to say preventing states from ratification, but could be a problem in ratifying the convention, or there is no real urgency in doing it, because in some European countries, in the, let's say, national legislation, we already have provisions protecting airlines and aircraft from seizure. And by the way, I have to say that as a consequence, and unfortunately, I have to say, in the last 20 years in Europe, we assisted to a lot of airline bankruptcies. And in no case we assisted to an intervention coming from the judge launching seizing procedures. So in a lot of countries, in Europe at least, we already have provisions protecting the special part of airplanes. It could be a way why, to explain why some governments are not so, I don't want to say so interested, but they're not so in hurry in ratifying the convention, because the national system already protects airplanes from seizure proceedings. Of course, I can understand that from an international point of view, lessors and international investors do prefer to have some, let's say, common rules in force. I can understand it.
Perfect, thank you. Now, moving on, Mr. Rajab, do you find any burning key issues across Saudi Arabia at the moment within the legal arena of aviation?
Again, thank you. This is another important question, Simon. I would second what has been done by Abdel Nabi Manar and Mr. We need to solve the lack of aircrafts. Today, when I see three top and the most busiest routes in the world here in this region, here in this country, however, that can be grown massively. But the issue, there is no aircraft. And I will come to the regulation a little bit. We have every day around 40 flights between Riyadh and Dubai. And that can be expanded 20% if we have available aircraft. We have 50 flights a day between Jeddah and Cairo. We have 60 flights a day between Riyadh and Jeddah. And season time, you cannot find a single seat available. Having said that, and with the massive strategy that been announced regarding tourism sector or Hajj and Umrah sectors or investment sectors, they need to be done regarding to manufacturing aircrafts. And how that can be done, they need to have a strong body. They need an instrument that can go and talk to ICAO, for example, talk to the international community in aviation regarding this. Having said that, and if you look at other regions, you would see an umbrella that holding these issues, holding these regulation issues. If you look at Europe, for example, you would see ICAC, and then you would see ACAO for Arab region, and then you would see LACAC for Latin American. But there is no one for Asian countries. If you look today to the number of passengers or flights Globally, you would find 32% in Asia, around 100, more than 111 airlines in Asia, and that's count for 35 globally. Similar to airports, around 40% of airports globally existed, international airports existed in Asia. Yet there is no an instrument that can take that forward, that can align between what's happening, not to mention cargo and other services that can be provided. Yet, I'm calling for establishment of an instrument that can be multilateral, plurilateral, or unilateral, to just unify the efforts, unify the regulation, unify the rules and plans among Asian countries, similar to what's happening the rest of the world and other regions.
Excellent. And then, Engineer Mana, are you seeing issues around the lack of capable staff, trained pilots, air traffic control staff, etc.? The availability of people that supports, as Mr. Rajab has said, around the massive growth that is required. Are you seeing like a lack of availability of people?
I think so, because of as I said before, the forecast concerning the development of air transport specifically in the Arab region. We do need for the 15 coming years thousands of pilots, technicians, and air traffic controllers. It represents around 13% from the whole needs of the international aviation community. I think from now we are facing difficulties because young people are losing confidence in aviation career because of the COVID-19 crisis, for example. And we have to find more attractions for those young people to reach the aviation community. But also, we have to coordinate our efforts concerning the infrastructure and the means to provide enough competencies in this sector. But as I told you, according to the forecast, there is a lack of pilots. So, as it was said by my friend from GACA, Ali, there is a problem for the lack of aircrafts, and probably we'll get aircrafts later. There is also a lack of competencies we are looking for, and to train those people. We have the capacities to train, but it requires a long time. And probably for the closest years, and we'll find some difficulties, but I think we will overcome this issue. But now it's a real issue, yes, that's right.
And then a similar question for South America and then over to Europe as well. How are you finding the training of staff and availability of people across the different areas, and how does that impact work?
Yes, yeah. We are facing the same issues in all the region, and because all of us want to, I don't know, we need training in a regular basis. We need training for different areas in our sector, and there are lack of technicians in our sector, and that compromise the sector. But I am sure in the future we will reach more people as in the Arab region. They are looking for young people, young people to join to our industry, but it's exactly the same that Manar explained, what happened in Latin America and the Caribbean countries. But let me say something regarding Cape Town Convention, because I was thinking in that, and I totally agree with Alessio Quarenta, the president of ICAC, that we need simple rules and the same framework for the whole world. And I remember I checked that more or less 10 countries ratified the Cape Town Convention, and Chile signed the Cape Town Convention, but Chile didn't ratify the convention. I was in the Aviation Authority from Chile at that time, and when we assessed that, we realized that we need to change our local law because there is an Anglo-Saxon system and we are based in this Roman system. And that's the reason why it couldn't be possible for us just ratify the Cape Town Convention. And this is a big deal. I need to research more, but I suppose it's something similar for the other countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. They cannot sign or they cannot ratify this convention. And I was wondering what will happen when some issue become if the countries which ratify the convention, I don't know, maybe there will be a collision between the local law and the treaty. And this is something really important in order to, I don't know, to obtain more ratifications of the convention.
No, that's right. And it's a really complicated area of law. As I said, insolvency law, domestic insolvency law on its own is typically one of the more complicated areas. To put this in is as you're correct, it can be a challenge in some jurisdictions. And what we've also seen, there are some countries who have done all the proper implementations and everything's been fine, and then they've introduced a new insolvency law, which is kind of forgotten about Cape Town. So then you can go from being in a first-class position with everything working to suddenly having a problem. So yeah, the challenge you raise is absolutely correct, and I suspect it is much easier. I mean, I'm a common law lawyer, but I suspect it is a lot easier in a common law jurisdiction to do that than it potentially is in a civil law.
If I come back a little bit on what I said before, first of all, I completely agree with my Saudi colleague. As president of ICAC, a regional organization, I can witness how important it is to be organized and coordinated in one region in order to try to fix, let's say, common policies. And I agree with you. It's a pity not having a regional organization in Asia Pacific region, which is one of the most growing area in aviation in this, not only this time. I think it has never. Coming back to training, I completely agree with Manar and Jaime. We don't have a capacity building problem. We have capacity of training to be developed. The problem is we don't have people to train. That's the real problem. This sector is not anymore attractive like in the past. You remember 30 years ago, being a pilot or a cabin crew or in general working aviation was seen as one of the best possible employment someone could have. Nowadays, we have mainly two main problems to discuss and to solve. First of all, we live in a weak environment, and the COVID clearly demonstrated it, because during the pandemic, more or less 100% of the fleet has been grounded because of the COVID. And then nowadays, even from the younger generation point of view, aviation is seen as one of the most polluting sector in the world, and there is reluctances to be involved in aviation. So I think we should promote a little bit better ourselves in order to be more attractive and to try to be interested for younger generation. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to continue to grow as the traffic demand is showing us.
Perfect, thank you. And then, Stephen, looking over towards the disputes, because we are talking in a legal forum, and one of the joyful areas is the world that you and I in particular get involved in, which is managing disputes. How do you find that disputes are typically managed across the work that you do and across the world, from the various the more simple negotiation in some jurisdictions all the way through to arbitration and litigation? How do you find it goes?
It's actually one of the things I love about this region is there always seems to be a real determination, which you don't find in all other parts of the world, to say, well, actually, if there's a problem or there's a dispute that comes up, let's sit down and talk about this and try and find a solution. So I think you see in agreements in this region a lot more so than you would elsewhere, building in a consultation period or a escalation kind of regime where for 60 days or 90 days we'll go and get senior management involved on both sides to sit down and let's do this sensibly, and let's not go through the hassle of using courts arbitration, taking the costs on board of that. So I think that's point number one, is you certainly see that a lot more regionally here, which I think is a really great thing. And then you come into kind of, I guess, two categories of potential disputes in this sector. There's number one is the more straightforward kind of breach of contract. Maybe rent's not been paid, and you're trying to recover money. The bank debt's not been repaid. You're trying to recover the money, and in that case, there is a tendency to start looking towards arbitration to keep things more private, more kind of under control of the parties in terms of choosing the arbitrators, choosing experts, etc., rather than using courts who may not have experience of particular arbitration disputes. So that's the kind of that kind of first step for just a general dispute. There is still, however, the ultimate point being here that the asset, the aircraft, is the value for the investors, for the banks. So if there is any kind of dispute or anything where that asset is at risk, and we know that aircraft, if they're not maintained properly, if they're not insured properly, the value can quickly go down if something happens. So the idea then of being to have a regime where you can just go and get the aircraft or have a very quick resolution, and that's where we typically will see parties still defaulting to courts. It's often the courts in jurisdictions where there will be maybe ex parte relief. You can go and see a judge without the other party knowing. You can get accelerated relief as well, just in order to get the aircraft back very quickly. So that is still where parties will still keep their options open to go to a court and get that quick relief. It can be another question then of moving into actually getting the metal back in a particular jurisdiction. But yeah, that's very much how we see the different kind of areas of dispute resolution. But as I said, coming back to that key point in this particular sector is, as soon as the asset starts being put at risk and the value of the asset is potentially going to go down, then the parties who own finance have an interest in that asset, and the value of the asset will want to move as quickly as they can to go and get it back.
It comes back to that good old word, communication, and that goes back before you have to negotiate. You just want to communicate with the different parties that are involved. One of the organisations that I'm also involved in is the Hague Court of Arbitration for Aviation, and they are specifically around supporting the aviation industry across the world in disputes and the like, so that the participants involved are already experienced in aviation, rather than going to a court where you would have to teach the judge, maybe some of the lawyers, what the acronyms are. What does ICAO stand for? Okay, well, everyone involved with the HCAA, they know this.
Let me say something regarding that. In our sector, we talk about an ecosystem. We don't say system, we say ecosystem. We say that we are living in something that is alive, and we need to cooperate each other, all the stakeholders. And that's the reason why resolve our disputes is really important. And litigation should be the last method, because when you litigate, in some way you damage the relationship between the parts. And that's the reason why it's necessary to solve our disputes, our issues, using, I don't know, arbitration, mediation, and other methods rather than litigation.
Yeah, I agree with Jaime. By the way, I think in general terms, of course, let's say, as a general rule of life, negotiation should be the best way to solve conflict between people everywhere. But when it comes to juridical systems, sometimes we have a problem of compatibility, of new jurisdictions. A lot of constitutional systems do not provide for derogation of jurisdictions, or it could be possible only under a specific length and difficult procedure. That is why we do normally try to use in our negotiation, even in concluding bilaterals, for instance, to avoid, let's say, arbitrations or allegation of different jurisdictions rather than national one, preferring to have a negotiation process in solving our, let's say, claims on general problems. It's not only a problem when it comes to discuss about aircraft or Cape Town Convention, financing or leasing and blah, blah, blah. We have the same problem, for instance, in the security sector, where a lot of countries have not yet ratified the Tokyo Convention together with the Montreal Protocol because of the 50 jurisdictions. So in general, we have problems when it comes to, let's say, define and manage the derogation of jurisdiction. That's the reason why I think the egg organism you mentioned is one of the best possible solutions put on the table for the interest of aviation in terms of trying to be attractive and to leave, let's say, between brackets, a privately organization to solve their own conflicts, even in aviation.
And as we all know, aviation is whilst it is very global, it is also very small, where we all know each other. If we think of the different contacts that we all have here at just this event, there's many different people involved that we all get to know. So you don't want to litigate and destroy those relationships. You want to keep talking with each other and go back all the way back to that lovely word communication right at the very beginning. This leads on to a question that I always like to ask, and is a nice positive question. And I'll invite all of you on this. What do you see as the future of work in aviation to incorporate from here in Saudi Arabia through to South America, across the world? How do you see the future of aviation being, Engineer Manal?
We'll begin by the market. We're talking since the many decades about liberalization, but in fact we did not achieve the whole process. Particularly in Europe, they succeeded in creating the one single market from the economic point of view. But in our region, in LACAC region, South America, and also in Africa, they are still in the process. This is the first challenge to overcome and open more the market, especially between the involved states in the region. Secondly, what could support development? I mean, the environment constraint and the automation. These are the main, items that we have to examine and to develop in depth. Because for the environment, we know that the cost will be very high, and this maybe will impact the air transport activity from the first years. Maybe after it will be overcome, but it's a challenge for the time being. It's very costly. We don't have enough infrastructure for the SAF production, for example. The automations bring some challenges also, cybersecurity, AI also for the security organizations in national organizations. So these are the main issues. And also for the human resources, we have already talked about this. We need more attraction for that young generation will be attracted by the sector. But also the availability of the aircrafts. The new with the Cape Town, you were talking about the Cape Town Convention. The new thing is that we are just living a crisis period, and during which owning aircraft is something that maybe airlines are rethinking about it, and maybe the easiest one to lease aircrafts, and when there is a crisis, they just return it to the owner. So maybe this is new, maybe the new thing for the putting on the table the Cape Town Convention, and ease the possibility for investors to finance more aircrafts quickly and increase the capacity. There is a problem with the airport's capacity, especially in Europe, which is the main market for the Arab countries, more than 100 million passengers, I think, yes, more than that. And we have a limitation. Not only, in fact, the Arab region, the whole world is facing the same problems with the airport's capacity in Europe. So these are things that we have to work on to ease the development of the air transport in the world. Thank you.
Cool, thank you very much. And
Yeah, of course. If
looking
I can,
over to Europe.
Yeah, if I can echo what has been said by Manar, of course.
بلا أدنى شك سؤالكم يعني ماذا سنفعل في الملاحة الآن؟
Main challenge will be
التحدي الأساسي
reconcile
هو طريقة التناغم ما بين الملاحة والبيئة. كما تعلمون الملاحة وتطوير الملاحة هو ما يدمج الملاحة وتطويرها مع إذن بلا أدنى شك
transport that have already committed something important in front of environment. When 2 years ago in Montreal during the assembly and last year in Dubai during the CAF 3 has been decided to be neutral in emissions, in gas emissions by 2050 in aviation. Then, of course, as told by Manar, we have, especially in Europe, a capacity crunch problem, of course. Because for the time being we don't have enough infrastructure in order to host all the traffic demand we foresee for coming years. And there is another way where we need, where and when we need to intervene in imagining new infrastructure compatible with the environment and imagine a growth in the sector that cannot affect the environment more than we are doing today, of course. Even if I have to say, because we need to be honest with ourselves, for the time being, at least aviation is contributing to the entire gas emission in the world less than 2%, which doesn't mean that we do not intervene, of course. We need to intervene in any case, but having in mind that aviation probably should promote a little bit better itself, because as we told even before, when we were talking about training, probably our sector is perceived as something different from what is really is. Then if your question, on the other hand, meant what could be in general the future, I think we should have a look of new technologies, and in particular to advance or urban air mobility, because it will change completely the shape of the air transport, at least locally. It's not a secret that probably in Europe this year, in the margins, in occasion the Olympic Games in Paris, we will have passenger service operated by an eVTOL connecting Charles de Gaulle or Beauvau or Le Bourget with Paris. Probably in 2025 we will have the same services launched in Rome in the occasion of the Vatican Jubilee, connecting Fiumicino Airport with the center of the town. Probably again in Italy in 2026 we will have a connection operated by eVTOL connecting Milan and Cortina for the 2026 Winter Olympic Games. So there's a lot of activity going on involving a new way of imagining what aviation could be from the technical, but even from the commercial point point of view. And there is a lot of work going on in Europe. Then we have another, let's say, technological development. We are not discussing a lot about it, but honestly, from a technical point of view, it is behind the angle, which is the so-called suborbital flight or suborbital connection. We are talking about possibility to connect Europe and the western part of US, for instance, in 1 hour and 40 minutes. It will mean completely to change the way of doing business. Of course, for the time being, we are imagining transportation of goods rather than passengers. But as I was telling you before, technology really runs faster. And in Europe, we have a lot of experience in UK, in France, in Italy, in Sweden, where we are imagining how to build and to run a spaceport in order to explore this new possibility. We have a lot of investments coming from US operators in Europe developing such a possibility.
Thank you. And Stephen, Mr. Carranza here has talked about the evolving technologies and the like with space, with travel. Do you feel that, in your experience, from a regulatory and legal perspective, the rules are keeping up?
No, I don't think so. I think wrong. Who's going to take the blame for that? So I think in a number of countries, when you look at drones, for example, have taken a very prescriptive regime of saying, all drones are banned unless you have a license, and that's clearly a very simple way of controlling it as a starting point. But I think a lot of the regulation is still lagging as things develop. But I think as a wider point, again, looking at the kind of current position, kind of again legal and regulatory perspective, the COVID crisis taught a lot of lessons, because all of a sudden even basic things like having someone in a room signing documents with a pen became impossible. So we had to adapt. Things like DocuSign became more prevalent. Not having to go and visit an aviation authority with all your original documents to register your aircraft. The aviation authority started launching things like online portals to submit documents, online notarizations, for example. So I think that even at that, if you take a step back from the really sophisticated kind of future of things being delivered by drone, just coming back to the basics, there's still a lot of work to do just to make sure that institutions aren't requiring 50 original documents in their safe to potentially pull out and take to court one day, or people to attend things in person, because we've seen even after COVID that people have tried to slip back into the old ways. So I think as a starting point, there's still a lot of work to do on that as well. And a lot of countries have made good progress on that. But I certainly think you're looking forward. There's a number of jurisdictions who are ahead of the curve, but there's also probably the general trend is that people are behind. I think partially because some of the innovation is so mind-blowing that people just haven't managed to get their heads around the potential consequences of what could happen.
If I may say, Simon, just in addition, air transport is the most safest mode of transport, and in aviation we have to keep this level of safety, which means that the process currently practiced by international community and national community according to the international standards, that we have to follow a process which is long. It will not change. I think Mr. Quarenta will deal with me. So we have to follow this way, and I think that the consumers will understand this issue, this process. Yeah.
If I can add here, Simon, just 3 points on what has been mentioned here from my colleagues. I agree connectivity is the most needed one. And I will be realistic. Connectivity today is what we need for a future. We have growing population that they have desire to travel, they have desire to go everywhere. Yet we have some restrictions from some countries. For example, And I used to be negotiator for the air surface agreement. And you go and negotiate with a country that there is no national carriers there, yet they would give you 2 or 3 flights a week, which is strange. They should allow for more flights so they can prosper the airport, prosper the city and the country. We need more comprehensive agreements similar to what has been done in Europe, and that can be implemented the rest of the world, and that will enhance connectivities and cooperation between countries. Second point, I think, is we need to allow more business and investment from business sectors to be injected within the aviation. We need to have the government just watch the aviation or let the aviation growing itself. We have launched, as I said, 2 years ago, the national strategy, and I believe my colleagues Mohammed Al-Kharisi will have a intensive session about the development of the strategy right after this session. But we realized if you want to develop your aviation sectors, you need to do a lot of things, including enhancing the airlines that you have, enhancing the airports you have, and then enhancing the trainings and the capacity buildings that you have. And so if you cannot have airport development, for example, then no matter how many aircraft you have, if the airport is less in capacity than what you have. And always we know this, when business people run airport, run any business, it's a way better than the government. Government bring more bureaucracy, government bring more supervision. Yes, it has its positives and negatives, but at least business people will focus on bringing more economy to the country. And last point, as I mentioned before, we need continental arrangement, continental cooperation that will link all countries together.
Perfect, thank you. And finally, looking to South America, what do you see as the exciting future down there? I'm conscious we've got about 2.5 minutes left. Sorry, I don't want to cut you short.
Yes. I should add something smart, but I totally agree with what you mentioned before. Just a brief story. A few years ago, I was in a workshop with colleagues from Latin American and the Caribbean countries, and we assessed the low-cost phenomena in Europe. And finally, the result of the workshop was this model is impossible in Latin America because we don't have secondary airports. We don't have this liberalization framework. I don't remember the third one, but it was the long distance. There are huge distance in Latin America. After 5 years, the low-cost carriers come to our region. What is the lesson of this story? It's not possible to predict the future because for sure you will be wrong. What happened? Because the low-cost model appeared strongly in Europe, it appeared acknowledged. And this knowledge could be exported to other regions. And today, this phenomena is changing the business models even for the legacy companies in Latin America. And maybe we just need to wait what happened in other regions, more developing, but it's not enough. Our dream is have this single market, of course, liberalize the entire market in the world, because this is the first step. And then we need to introduce more infrastructure, airports, technology, and so on. But the first step is really necessary. It's a really bad idea to try to control our sector using the transport policy. We need to just liberalize, but in a global basis. I know that's not possible, but this is it's like a wish thinking.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'm conscious of our time running out. The other topic that we haven't gone on to, and we possibly could maybe in the hallway out there, is SAF and hydrogen electric vehicles, the impact that they could bring as well, along with the regulation that support them. But anyone here who wants to come and talk with us about that, please feel free to. So on that note, we are running out of time, so I would like to thank everybody here today for coming and speaking with us. And if I could invite the room to thank everybody in the usual manner. Thank you. Thank you, and I'll hand back to our organisers.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Saudi Arabia's state of aviation is a story told through our leaders.
The Red Sea Global is trying to lead a global transition towards regenerative development. We've taken the view that sustainability is no longer enough and that we need to do better, both for people and for planet. So that approach also applies to the design of our airport.
Beyond the immediate applications, we see the advanced air mobility dramatically enhancing connectivity, reducing travel times, and offering new mobility solutions that were previously unfeasible. GACA is at the forefront of it, developing a robust regulatory framework to ensure these advancements are safely integrated into our national airspace.
With the forecasted growth of Jeddah Airport to grow to over 100 million passengers, we are ready. We have an approved master plan to take us there. It includes additional runways, taxiways, terminals, cargo buildings, fuel farm, and catering. Jeddah Airport is ready to go forward, and we are moving ahead.
At Riyadh Air, we have hired already 28 pilots. We are also hiring our cabin crew at this time. We have already inducted 20 cabin crew. We should be hiring an extra 100 by the end of the year. And we are inducting everybody so early at this time so that they can have the actual experience and expertise that we are looking for here at Riyadh Air.
An airplane has an average of 8,000 different sensors. An MRO should be able to keep up with that. ST Nova, what I have on my shoulder right now, is a sensor that generates abundance of data for people, parts, equipment, and tools, all moving in harmony, creating a digital twin of the hangar in virtual space with real-life tracking of everything that happens.
Across all corners of the kingdom, aviation is enabling growth, livelihoods, and connectivity, generating unprecedented economic activity, employing more people than ever before, connecting Saudi Arabia to the world and the world to Saudi Arabia. The state of aviation, championing aviation's progress in support of Vision 2030. Saudi Arabia, elevating global connectivity.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Lexon. I'm Senior Director at Consulum, and it's my pleasure to be facilitating this very special Saudi Aviation Strategy briefing today, where we will take a deep dive into the development, implementation, governance of the Saudi Aviation Strategy since it was approved by the Council of Ministers in 2020, with one of the architects of that strategy. And we will also have the privilege to see how that strategy is being implemented in the cargo and logistics sector. And most importantly, everyone here will have the opportunity to ask your questions about how the Saudi Aviation Strategy is being implemented and the path forward through to 2030. It's now my privilege to introduce our first presenter and speaker, Mohammed Al-Quraizi, the Executive Vice President for Strategy and Business Intelligence at GACA.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here today and welcome to an exclusive Saudi Aviation Strategy session. So we'll start with a nutshell about the Saudi Aviation Strategy. Our objective is to lead in the Middle East through aviation. As all of you know, that aviation is actually a key enabler for so many economic activities, whether it's trade, whether it's cargo, whether it's enabling investments and foreign direct investments. But most importantly, it's the sector that connects people, with their beloved ones, allow them to travel, allow them to explore different cultures, like what we're doing here today in Riyadh. So thank you for being here. Our vision is to empower Vision 2030 to lead an aviation sector in the Middle East. Now, before 2015, Saudi economy is mainly oil dependent, if you will. And there was a clever vision and plan to diversify the economy. So we want to move from oil-based economy to more of a diversified economy where we can grow many non-oil sectors. And one of the major sectors are tourism. So the country was quite closed before 2015. Now you can have your visa upon arrival at the airport for so many nationalities. And you can explore the hidden gems of Saudi Arabia, whether in the spiritual side in the West region. There is a lot of the traditional sites like Al-Ula, which is a UNESCO heritage site, and there is the south of Saudi Arabia, Abha, where there's a great mountains and greenery. Now, to enable tourism and to have great tourism contribution to the economy, you need aviation. And in that, you need airports, and you need airlines, and you need services. So in the airlines front, Saudi was stretched too thin. They're operating Riyadh, Jeddah, Dammam, Medina, among all of the other regional and domestic airports. And we have 29 airports in the kingdom, unlike some of the neighboring countries where they're pretty much concentrated into one mega hub, but we have 29 airports that we need to serve. And we have 35 million population. The first mean of transport is basically aviation. So for that, we said Saudi should follow the best practices, maybe consolidate their operation in Jeddah. And then we have a chance to basically open for a new airline in Riyadh, which is Riyadh Air, to be based in King Salman Airport. So on the airlines, Riyadh Air from Riyadh, and then Saudi from King Abdulaziz Airport in Jeddah. And then you have both Jeddah and Riyadh Airport acting as a dual hub, each 100 million passengers. And people would think that they're close to each other. No, they're not. They're 2 hours away by plane. They're 1,000 kilometers away by roads. And they are the most populated two places in Saudi. And Riyadh is the capital, is the political will and the business hub. And you have Jeddah is the gateway for the Haramain, Mecca and Medina, but also a gateway for the Red Sea coast, where Neom, Red Sea, and others would take place. So that's the airlines and the airports. Then you have the network. We had 99 destinations connected directly to the kingdom. So for people to travel, it's normal today to transit via Dubai or Doha or Istanbul. Our target is to have people going from Saudi to Saudi directly, and we'd like to link it with 250 destinations, in opposed to 99 destinations back in 2019. It's important to do that in a way that enhances passenger experience, in a way that is environmental friendly, and also we would like to increase low-cost market share, especially in the short-haul space, because they are the one who offers more frequency, cheaper flights, but also they are more aggressive in opening new markets and new destinations. On the services, we'd like to see more handlers, more cargo handlers, more catering, more MRO. It's just perfect to have more competition, and the more competition you have, the better. So we have a steering committee with all of our ecosystem. We have the airports, airlines, handlers, MRO, tourism entities, meeting up and gathering every quarter. And in that quarterly meeting, we basically cover our performance in that quarter, our implementation update, also the achievements that we have achieved and we celebrate it together, and also we deep dive on selected challenges. So we have created a platform chaired by GACA, and it entails all the aviation and tourism ecosystem under one roof, and we discuss where are we in our national strategy implementation, what challenges are there, how can we address it basically, and most importantly, we celebrate our successes. A snapshot on what have we achieved so far. So in 2020, where we have the previous edition of the Future Aviation Forum, we basically carved out all the airport assets to Matarat. So GACA, which is the aviation regulator, for the first time since its inception, becomes a pure regulator. So we segregated regulation activities and operations activities, and that was step number one. Then Avilease, which is a company owned by PIF, has emerged as well, and they support the financing of the aircrafts. Because we're ordering so many aircrafts, we thought we should have a local lessor for the market. We launched Riyadh Integrated, which is a truly integrated logistics zones at King Khalid Airport. It offers very generous incentive scheme, tax exemptions, relaxed labor law and requirements. And then in November, His Royal Highness launched King Salman Airport, which is basically Riyadh Airport. We would be taking the capacity from 40 million to 120 million by 2030. And work has started already. Then in 2023, which is last year, Riyadh Air launched, and that will be using King Salman as their main hub. In April, one of the achievements that I'm really proud of, where Saudi Arabia jumps on the connectivity ranking 14th ranks. So we were, I think, number 27. We jumped to number 13, so we are in the top 15 most connected countries. Our objective is to be among the top 5. So we have progressed so well, but we have still a long way to go. In June, NEOM has the first eVTOL flight, and we did a demo of the eVTOL, a picture of the advanced air mobility that Saudi Arabia is keen to enable. We know it's in early stages, like R&D, but we would like to be among the first to support, invest, and try that technology. Red Sea Airport opens, and one note about Red Sea is that it's the first carbon neutral airport in the region. So full renewables and full clean energy used to operate the airport. In November, we have the largest overhaul of economic regulations for the last 15 years. And we have adjusted our tariff structure. We have provided more autonomy to the private sector to set their own charges, under checks and balances, of course, by the regulator. But we have removed so many unnecessary obligations and requirements and documentation. We just wanted to ensure that the market is incentivizing others to join, basically. And we have strengthened our passenger rights. So people who lose their bags or their flights get delayed or they are denied onboarding, we have revised the fines. And the point is not to fine airlines. The point is to push everyone in the ecosystem to work towards the passenger. And I think that's what matters. Although it's only 5 months down 2024, we have launched Abha Airport as a PPP opportunity. So we have tendered the airport in the region, which is our 5th largest airport after Riyadh, Jeddah, Dammam, and Medina. We got an overwhelming expressions of interest. More than 100 companies expressed their interests in a form of a consortium between developers, operators, as well as funds and capital. And in March, Medina Airport, which is the truly first PPP in the region, has also announced doubling their capacity, moving from 8 million passengers a year to 17 million passengers a year. And in Medina, there was a COVID during that pandemic, and the contract was basically tested, and I think we were also among the first regulators to react quickly, extend the agreement, relieve the concessionaire from their obligations until they recover pre-pandemic levels. And as a result, today they are doubling their capacity. And GACA also announced a record-breaking year for passenger volumes. We had 112 million passengers in 2023. And for the first time also, the number of international passengers was 60 million. And 50 million or 51 million is the domestic passengers. So we have so many first times. It's our highest record as well as our highest international visits. And again, it's a testimony to where are we heading. It's about the direction. We're not, and people all the time ask me about how realistic is your targets? How are you going to triple in 5 years? I'll say, you're missing the point. The point is the direction. There's a national framework, there's a national plan. Everyone is working towards it. Now we achieve it 2030, 2035, 2040. Be it. I'm personally, I think we will achieve it before 2030, given the momentum that we see today. Last but not least, we also announced major aircraft order today, Saudi, and before Flynas, Flyadil, and Riyadh Air, and I think there will be 2 more announcements to come this year. And we have also inaugurated the general aviation roadmap, which is a sector that was basically overlooked, but now we would like to tap into that, and we would like to have 6 dedicated GA airports and 9 GA terminals within these airports. Of course, we will need more FBOs, and we will need more MROs, and we will need more jet operators in that strategy. These are the figures that I just mentioned, 112 million passengers, 26% growth compared to 2022. Now, in order to have 300 million by 2030, we would require a CAGR of 16%. Last year, we had 26%. This 4 months, we had around 18 to 20%. So far, we are on track. Well, I hope we continue the momentum. We had 61 million passengers, 148 destinations. That's 50% more than 2022, which was around 99 destinations. Now it's 150. and we still have 100 more destinations to add. So maybe quickly, insights that I can share to other sectors and other fellow civil aviation authorities and government bodies. Number one, building a sector strategy, and people can underestimate or undermine the significance and the importance of having a true North Star. It is a target that aligns everyone in the ecosystem to work toward it. Previously and before the strategy, you would have the airlines managing their P&L, airports the same, and handlers are the same. Today, there is the P&L, it's given, but also there is the national objectives, and there is the tourism, and there is the vision, and there is the economic development, which the national companies are taking very seriously as well. Also, strategy development, like think beyond. I think building it in isolation or building it in silos will make it very hard to be implemented, will not ensure buy-in from the stakeholders and from the ecosystem. Plus, you need to ensure that you're addressing the tourism part, you're addressing the investment part. So it's a country's vision, not necessarily a one sector specific plans. In the implementation, we will face challenges. We have faced some, we have overcome, some we're trying to overcome. But with coordination, with being consistent, with persistency as well, I think that is a way to move around the challenges. And you know, if you join forces, all the ecosystem are working towards one direction. That's also one important part of getting the strategy implemented. Last point maybe is transparency and communication. The more you communicate, the more you transparently share your views with the ecosystem, especially as a regulator. A lot of regulators, they will just publish their regulations and little explanation of why and how, but the consultation process before, during, and after can ensure that you're dynamic, you're flexible, you're adaptable to the market needs, and also, most importantly, that your regulations are fit for purpose. Maybe that's in a nutshell. We'll talk more about it with my colleague Luay, and I welcome all of your questions. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mohammed, for that comprehensive run-through of the Saudi aviation strategy progress to date. We've heard from the strategist, and we're also very delighted to welcome one of the aviation sector leaders who can provide a unique perspective on the implementation of the strategy when it comes to cargo and logistics. The current Managing Director of Saudia Cargo, previous Deputy Minister for Transport and Logistics, and Deputy Governor of Customs, Loay Mashavi. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you.
So I'll start with two quick questions, Mohammed, to set the scene when it comes to the strategy. I know there will be other regulators or ministries from around the world who will be interested in how to develop a sector strategy like this in their own countries. Can you just rewind to 2019, 2020 and just talk through the impetus to spark the development of the strategy, a unique position taken by GACA as a regulator to develop that in many instances ahead of other sectors in the kingdom. So what sparked that development by your team?
So absolutely. Again, it starts with Vision 2030. The country has a blueprint to diversify the economy. And then there are many other sectors that is required to deliver, i.e. tourism, Hajj and Umrah, there is the export strategy, industrial strategy, and also there is the investment strategy. And so many strategies can be enabled by aviation. So you start by saying, what would be the aviation role? Do we treat it as a profit/cost center, or do we treat it as an economic enabler and catalyst? Or how would you position it, basically? What do you want to achieve? And how that sector can help your economy and the bigger picture. From that point, you need to work with everyone, like literally everyone, whether it's government entities, whether it's the regulated entities, the companies in the sector. And we, of course, learn from the best practices. We're not the first country who did this, and we're not going to be the last. So we learn from peer civil aviation authorities, from the international organizations, AKU framework, IATA, ACI. We reach to the experts and the Insights House. And then I would say it's almost important to understand your shortcomings and what's your unique competitive advantage. For example, this region is a highly competitive aviation sector, and you see UAE is having 2 hubs for transit passengers, and then Qatar mainly it's transit passengers, and then Istanbul you have a very good mix of O&D and transit passengers. You ask yourself, what do you want to achieve in Saudi? Do I want people connecting from west to east via Saudi, or do I want to ensure that people come, stay in Saudi, explore Saudi, go to Al-Ula, go to Qiddiya, Dir'iyya, perform spiritual tasks of Muslims, and then spend some time in Riyadh, attend conferences. Maybe you can watch Cristiano Ronaldo playing football, or maybe you can watch the fight of Usyk and Fury. So many things are happening, and our main objective was, we have 29 airports, 36 million population, and we have tourism. We would like people to come enjoy Saudi Arabia. By that, you would have a natural transit passenger, but it's not going to be our focus. If you understand your shortcomings, your positioning, your true competitive advantage, I would say the rest is an outcome. The rest is just what do you need to do to achieve these objectives.
Brilliant. And one quick follow-up question. We saw some impressive photos of the sector in one room working through the strategy. I think it was from Jeddah recently. Was that something that started straight away? I mean, it is a unique position when you're the regulator and you're the policeman in some instances, but then you're working alongside all of the entities. Was that buy-in across the sector immediate, or was that something that had to be worked through over time?
No, honestly, it was very organic. It started as an idea about why don't we get together in one room to review our performance? And it started as GACA, by the way. So it was only the Civil Aviation Authority meeting together, the VPs and the president, and we were discussing. And then every other meeting, we would call 1 or 2 entities because there was specific issues related to them, whether it's airports or airline or handling. And then with the time, we reached to a point where we have around 300 people in one room, and they represent every single entity in the ecosystem. And we ensured that it's Chatham House rules. So it's not recorded, it's not for PR, it's closed doors, like the session. And it's a platform to discuss progress on one side and what's preventing you on another side, and what challenges. And we had some serious conversation and some serious confrontation about why the regulator is slashing airport charges, and why the airlines would demand higher cuts and the airport would say you're too aggressive. And we had this dialogue, and I think it's healthy and helpful to have this dialogue. But I would say it's something that we built over time and was very organic.
Very good. And now turning to one of those entities who is driving a lot of the Saudi aviation strategy when it comes to cargo and logistics. Laurie, can you just set the scene for us in terms of Saudi Cargo's current strategy, how that links to the overall national agenda?
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, first of all, he keeps looking at me when he talks about regulator versus operators, and I think this is essential. You cannot overstate, the importance of this alignment, having one vision to both, and those meetings are just the crisp of the communication is just open, direct, and honest, and this is, I think, why results are happening. It is an exciting time, no question about it. Exciting to be in Saudi. The captive demand, if you compare it to the neighbors, is quite a lot higher. If you look at e-commerce market share, Saudi Arabia 70%, and you name it, across the board, the captive demand itself is quite high. So improving our cargo services is important just to improve the quality of life and the flow of goods into Saudi Arabia. Transit and transfer, re-export becomes a side product to all of that. So that was the main focus. Saudi Cargo operates 8 aircrafts, 8 freighters, and has access to about 30 wide-body passenger aircrafts. What is interesting this year, we have in Q1 grew our business, the volume we've carried, the cargo we've carried, by 32% in one quarter. But we have lost market share. This just tells you the speed of which the market is growing. predominantly driven by growth in e-commerce domain. We've seen movement from e-commerce from China to Europe, where the biggest Chinese companies are investing in Europe and in Saudi also to expand their outreach. And subcontinent, so India and Pakistan, a lot of that driven by there. So all that growth, and we're still way behind. And this makes us comfortable in big investments in capacity buildup. As Mohammed said, we're fortunate, but also it's a challenge that the two top cargo players globally are next door. So Qatar and Emirates. And they have a completely different operating model. One based on fifth freedom, so no captive demand whatsoever, all between connecting different nations, and one predominantly based on passenger aircrafts with more than 250. What we're doing in Saudi is the following. We have more than 100 wide-body aircrafts that are coming in the next 5 years already ordered, compared to the 30 we have now, so you can make that comparison. And we are doubling our fleet for freighters next year, as soon as next year, not announced yet, but it will be announced very soon. So more than doubling our capacity within the span of 3 years. And that is just step one to regain market share and get back to the 60% market share. That is the role that Saudi Cargo is keen on playing. And with the changes that the regulator is working on, a lot of external players are coming into the country to cover the remaining 50% of that growth. We're seeing that this year. The first quarter is testament to that. But then I think also going forward. All of that growth, that captive demand, and we haven't still activated Expo. We haven't seen World Cup. The giga projects did not really start the construction that yields the result. This is all just the change of behavior of consumer towards more on-demand orders and so on and so forth. And this is, I think, the role that we have to play, and we are glad we are part of it.
Brilliant. I have to zoom in on some of those numbers. I mean, those were incredible numbers in terms of the 32% growth and then increasing the fleet by 100 wide bodies. So, I mean, with that level of expansion that Saudi Cargo is going through, what keeps you up at night, Loie? What are you focused on? Is it the demand out there in the market? Is it the competitiveness of the entity? Is it your suppliers? What are the things that Saudi is focused to achieve that level of growth?
Yeah. So there are enablers. I'm comfortable with all of them. The regulator is working exceptional on economic policies that yields more performance-based contracts and so on and so forth. The infrastructure, work done. Capacity, clear plans. Cargo facilities, clear plans. Free zones next to airports. The Riyadh integrated is one, but there are a couple. I'm not worried about that part. I'm not worried about this local economy. What keeps me worried to make those investments, and that's step one of the investments, there is step two, is the imbalance of trade between East and West. The stagnant European economy, we need full airplanes both ways. If it is in one way and the predominant side is in fact increasing and the weak side is in fact weakening, that is not sustainable and not healthy. And when you have 10 aircrafts to deal with, that's a problem. When you have 20, then it could be a catastrophe. So there is a lot of work that we are working on to find ways to have, as logisticians, as cargo handlers, to increase the cross flow. On the Saudi side, there are a lot of progress between the East and West on allowing Saudi produce to be accepted in Far Eastern markets, and that's a move in the right direction. But we're also connecting all the way to South America and North America, but South America predominantly, which has significant volumes can be flown to the East. So we're trying to connect with airlines that fly to Europe, and then we take it from Europe through Saudi to the East, just to facilitate this full movement back and forth. I still see it as a problem. I am hopeful and wishful for a more stable European state and then more thriving back to where it was, and we start seeing balanced trade.
Absolutely. And zooming out to a national perspective, Mohammed, I mean, there are some that see the Saudi aviation strategy, they see the Emirates, they see Qatar, they see the established players, and they see the targets that are out there and say, you know, how are we going to reach towards that? I know you addressed some of that in your presentation, but a similar question to Loe. What are the things as the strategic regulator are you focused on, are you concerned about in terms of enabling the sector to meet those targets across connectivity, passengers, cargo and
Absolutely.
logistics?
So my job is to enable, that's from one side. From the other side is to ensure the utmost safety and security standards and procedures. And then the question becomes, how can we grow, A, in a very sustainable manner, and B, while ensuring safety and security are not impacted, because we don't have even zero tolerance, it's negative tolerance. If anything that can go wrong, before it go wrong, we should eliminate. So that is my mainly job as a regulator. And for that, we are working on a full safety regulations reform. We're doing the state safety program. We are re-looking into some of our KGARs in terms of the requirements, the number of flying hours, etc., just to ensure that our regulations are up to date and in line with the new directions and trends that we do see. Second, we will be redesigning the airspace to ensure that we have shorter routes, to ensure we have adequate capacity. And you know, shortening flights can result in a better environmental outcomes, less carbon emissions, but also shorter duration, which is good for passengers. And also more capacity. So you're ticking so many boxes, basically, in one strategic project. And the economic regulations, we just launched it last year, which is enabling and attracting more players to the aviation sector in Saudi. And I'm listening to Loai, he was very excited that the sector is growing, but then his tone went down and said, well, market share went down. Well, you know, it's good to have also the growth, and yeah, and we will try to support everyone to have a level playing field, I would say. So that is a core principle that we have. Last point, in terms of our neighbors, and they are respectful and reputable aviation sectors. And I think I was having dinner last night with Stefano from ACI, and I was telling him, you know, when I go to Europe, I land in Paris, I would take a train, go to London, then probably I will go to Belgium and Germany and then come back. So we'd like to do the same thing here, and I think the growth in the upcoming decades would be from this region, and people who come to Dubai would visit Al-Ula eventually, and people who were in Qatar for the World Cup went to Dubai and went to Riyadh. And so there would be a spillover in every single country as a GCC. And I think the visitor for the GCC would like to explore so many locations in Salalah and Muscat and Kuwait and the rest. And if they develop and we develop, there will be spillovers both ways, actually.
Brilliant. And I'll just invite the audience, if there are any questions, please do raise your hand for Loe or Mohammed. Yes, please.
Oh, Victor, you're not allowed to. Please.
Saying that I don't know if you have mentioned your sustainability strategy, because you have mentioned growth in aircrafts, airports, cargo. What about sustainability? I mean, what is your strategy on sustainability? Regarding cargo, we are witnessing difficulties in the maritime transport because of geostrategic difficulties in the region. Is this affecting the increase of air cargo in your mind or not?
Thank you. Do we take question by question?
Yes.
You want to go first, Loy?
Yeah, no, so the only region we've seen impact because of the Red Sea shipping line issue is in the subcontinent, so India, Pakistan, and the areas around it. We've seen increase in volume and in prices. The rest, pharmaceuticals or perishables or fresh produce or e-commerce, are growing naturally, and they wouldn't typically be on shipping lines, and those are continuously growing. We see no impact of the Red Sea shipping line issue, with the exception of India, Pakistan. We've seen some impact, clear impact because of the issue.
Now on sustainability, this is something that we are developing as we speak, our aviation sustainability plan. AKU has announced the 2050, and some countries have said 2060 net zero. We're obliged and committed to achieve that goal. We're very clear on the objective. We do have some other ideas on the how. We don't think a single approach is the right approach towards net zero. We think a more comprehensive and inclusive approach that suits every country according to their readiness, according to their capability as well, to achieve that. So we're clear on the goal. It's net zero 2050. We're very committed and keen. We're developing our plan as we speak on every single element. It's not only the sustainable aviation fuel and the low carbon fuel, but also the airports, the renewables, waste management, noise, pollution, etc. And on the fuel particularly, we're developing our ideal plans on which product, by when, by what percentages. And we need to be realistic also on the approach. I think we see strong push from the West on the South. We know there is no feedstock. It's the waste food oil and the other sugar canes. If we use all the available sources in the world, you will not produce the demand today. Not even half of it, not even 25%. So I think it requires a diversified approach, and it requires an approach that is built to suit for each single state. We're clear on the goal. We have some ideas on the how.
Yes.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for a very informative session and wishing you the best of luck, Allah's blessings on your strategy. One point you mentioned, one of the issues you're looking at is redesigning the airspace. Could you expand on that a bit?
Yeah. So, first of all, quarter of the kingdom is the empty quarter. And today there is no routes in that area. And that's just an additional 25% capacity increase for the airspace. That's one. Two, we're examining our current air corridors. And there are restricted zones, there are not so optimal routes. So our objective is to redesign the airspace, the flight routes, basically. Can we make it shorter? Can we remove restrictions? Can we build new routes that we didn't have in the past? I think our current air navigation plan is in the 80s or so, if I'm not mistaken. So it's about time to update and reconfigure our airspace. And our objective is more capacity, shorter flights, less carbon emissions, and better customer experience as the result of that. And I think there will be one layer included in that study, which is for the advanced air mobility. So how can we segregate the airspace basically from the commercial aviation and from the urban air mobility inside city? So that is also another important output of that project. Project is 12 months program. 12 months غامض ولا أطول? It's 3 years. The first phase is 12 months. And we started end of last year. And we would be communicating, inshallah, outcomes as we go. I hope I addresses the... Thank you.
You mentioned strategies. Is there an aviation security strategy
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we have addressed sustainability. I have addressed safety. Now the third is security. There is also an ongoing update to the National Security Program, which is the program that identifies the processes and role and responsibilities for different government agencies within the airport. In Riyadh Airport, last month, we just installed the new facial recognition machines. So when you go to passport, you don't need to speak to anyone. There is a camera that takes your, scan your face, and then you're just good to go to the airside. And this is an update to the old National Security Program, what they wouldn't allow such technology. Now I would say with King Salman Airport and with the expansion in King Abdulaziz Airport as well as Red Sea Airport, they would be using the cutting edge technology for security, for inspection, for all of that. My job is to ensure highest level of safety and security. My job also to ensure good customer experience. So we're a bit in the middle. Usually the industry is way faster than us, and we are catching up with the emerging technologies, but we're trying to be at the forefront of the emerging technologies, adopting the new processes, measures, adopting more open mind while being aware of the risks as well that exist. We will have negative tolerance policy, but at the same time, we will have to enable such emerging technologies. But in short, yes, it is part of our plans, and it is something that we are updating as well. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Oh, sorry, over at the back there. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum. Yusuf Bannan from Mukamal Aviation or Aramco Aviation. Thank you for bringing up general aviation as part of the strategy. But my question is, if you can shed some more light basically on the general aviation strategy part, and what can we do as a general aviation operator basically, and what are the expectations from us as part of the strategy? Yeah.
So thank you. We were considering the private aviation components of that general aviation. Well, they were left behind, to be honest, and there was a lot of frustration for good reason that the sector is not developed very well. 25% of the jet owners keep their aircraft in Saudi Arabia. So 1 out of 4 keep his aircraft here, and 3 would take it outside. Why? There is no hangars, there is no good FBO service, there is no good, the ecosystem is not there. MRO is just, you can't have an aircraft that you spend hundreds of millions on and there is just no shielded area, or there's no good service or MRO. So for that, we have developed a very comprehensive roadmap that says, I need new terminals, I need more FBOs, I need more MROs, I need to invite more jet operators, the likes of JetX and Signature and the rest. And the new plan would have 6 dedicated general aviation airports. So in Riyadh, we will have another general aviation airport other than King Khalid, in Jeddah, in Dammam, in Medina, in Neom, in Amala. We will have a dedicated GA airports. Then we will have terminals within the commercial airport for general aviation, like Abha, Taif, all the touristic destinations will have their own general aviation terminals. And we are already talking with 2 FBOs, 2 jet operators in the certification process, so they can grow this market further. We're working with Saudi Technic to have their own MRO capability for the helicopters and for the GA, but we would like to have more players as well. So that's maybe in a nutshell our GA plan.
The question is just regarding the cargo side. You've mentioned 2 competitors, which are your neighbors. One's got belly capacity and the other's got the fifth freedom, right? And one of the other things you've mentioned is that you look at South America as far as Saudi is concerned and going more to the east. But just coming back, the focus on the kingdom particularly, and my question refers to more the food security. What are you finding, if you could, maybe I missed it in your initial introduction, are you finding that you're playing the feeder as to typically South America going out to the east, or from a food security point of view, are you bringing a lot in? Because if you have the conversation with GACA, for instance, they talk about Riyadh increasing the capacity of handling the cargo. And so I just want to get, again, clarity as far as that space is concerned, as far as Saudi is concerned, whether it's more of a feeder service, or are you bringing more into the kingdom itself? So again, if you could just go back to that.
No, I think very clear. On food security particularly, so the point between for South America and connecting it to the Far East is predominantly a capacity fill-out strategy, not a food security move. We do have a food security program that is separate, and there are certain routes that we fly to predominantly for food security reasons, and even the pricing and the volumes are completely separate from our normal commercial activities. But we are a very small player in a very big plan, which includes investments that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has made in farms and factories abroad. It includes free zone activation and strategic storage. It includes local farming, even if it's not feasible for certain elements, and includes improved logistics, which we play an important role. A funny story, just to give a flavor of so during COVID, when prices went up, our commercial directors also increased the prices on some of the food security elements that are out there, because prices of everything went up. 3 days later, we get letters from everywhere. You know, the prices of eggs have went up. What did you do? So you have to go back. So there are certain elements that we take a responsibility for food security reasons. Maybe one point to add here is the strengthening ties that we have right now with the African continent. We are the #1 flyer of flowers from Nairobi to Europe. It's a business we've had for a decade, and we continue to have. But this year we're adding destinations in 3 different African airports, in addition to the 3 we already serve, other than the Middle East, so pure South Africa and West Africa. That also has a lot of food security related aspects to them.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. عبد الرحمن مع مجموعة محمد علي السويلم, Moscow Group. My question is about the complexities of international logistics. How does your GACA foreign operations handle strategic partnerships with cargo airlines? Could you share some insights on the key criterion that you focus on?
Clear. Well, thank you for your question.
How do you do it, Mohammed?
So for GACA, it's never commercial. We don't get any, I think our license are $20 or so. So it's not the revenue-driven decision. But we have a role, and then the airport has a role, and then the other ecosystem has a role, and the competitor has a role as well. For us, is that what value are you bringing to the economy and to the country? How are you helping me realizing my targets, my aviation strategy targets? Are you bringing more volume? Are you reversing some of the leakage that I'm getting? Instead of getting it elsewhere, you're bringing it to me directly. Are you creating jobs? If all of that is achieved, then what is that's required from the regulator? Is it open skies? We will offer open skies. And actually, case in point is Cargolux that came to Dammam, and we gave them open skies. Basically, they can come, drop their cargo in Dammam, take whatever cargo and go anywhere. So that is a model that is an example of the criteria that nobody wins unless everyone wins. And from our perspective, is it our national strategy objectives, the key economic indicators, jobs, and are you reversing the leakage? What type of goods and are you bringing, and the value of those goods, how many jobs, etc. And then we offer the regulatory support in terms of bilateral agreements and flight rights. Now, the airport has also a role in their incentive scheme. They offer also discounts on landing or on parking for new destinations. For that also helps improve the economics of a new cargo operators. Then there is the commercial agreements with the handlers. We don't get into the airport conversation nor the handler conversation. We focus on the flight rights, the bilateral, and the licensing process.
Maybe I can add to that.
You're a Deputy Minister of Transport and Logistics just before Saudi Cargo.
Yeah, and I signed with the Cargolux.
Exactly.
No, but to give an example of how this works and how important this is. We fly, Saudi Cargo, 15 flights a week to China. And they have to be frequent and quick, and we cannot hold them. So sometimes we carry 80, 90%, 70% coming directly to Saudi, and then the remaining 30% to fill out the remaining of the airplane will be transit to Europe or Africa or wherever. And we then look at our passenger network. If we have a volume that is going to Milano or Frankfurt or whatever, we divert it to the belly of the passenger aircraft. But then there are destinations where we are not flying. So we start talking to Qatar, Emirates, Cargolux. Are you flying to these destinations? If yes, then I can serve my clients better in China, one deal, bulk, majority in Saudi, the rest is to the rest of the world through anyone who flies there to the Saudi airports. And since the regulator started opening up the skies, our volume increased, not decreased. It just tells you the importance of this collaboration between and availability. If it's flying, then it's already in a rush. If it had time, it would have been on a ship. So time is very crucial to win the business in that industry.
Assalamu alaikum, Faisal Arifi, KPMG. My question is mainly toward Mohammed. With the high number of passengers coming to Saudi, with the unprecedented numbers and the expected year-on-year growth, it becomes even more critical that the level of satisfaction and quality of services provided is being maintained or even increased. So how does GACA govern this or make sure that the level of quality and services provided are at its utmost, especially with the public service providers rather than the private sector? The private sector, you alluded to that in your presentation when you said that you've renewed the policies and for penalties and what sorts. However, what about the other side of the equation, which is the service providers from the public sector?
Thank you very much. I think everything that we do it for passengers. We're building new airports, we're adding capacity, we're adding new seats, and we're strengthening the regulations. It's all for passengers and passengers first. GACA has a division that's called Quality and Passenger Experience or Protection. And their main role is to ensure that the rights of the consumers are reserved. But more than that, that's the bare minimum. More than that, to put the standards and the minimum standards for providing the service. Actually, the new economic regulations also indicate certain thresholds for minimum accepted service levels. I think the Singaporean who are here has an outstanding experience in that area, and we keep learning from that wonderful experience and from the almighty Changi Airport. But for the airports, we are ensuring that King Salman Airport and the new expansions and the new terminals are in line with the best practices, i.e. Changi, that I would like to reference. In the airlines, it's the same. We would like to have all the new fleet, all the new aircrafts that provides the maximum passenger satisfaction. And we monitor that every month. We publish the results of each airport and each airline on the number of complaints, how are they processing and resolving the complaints, and most importantly, what was the complaints about. So we provide transparency for the customers when booking their flight. They know X airline was being known for being delayed. X airline been having 100 incidents in the last 3 months of losing bags, etc. So we publish that every month, and we monitor by our quality inspectors every month. And again, it's a transparency, it's a communication. Our objective is not to penalize nor embarrass anyone, but rather elevate the experience. So I would say it's embedded in the new expansion and new projects. There is a minimum accepted service levels in the economic regulations. There is quality inspectors at the airport and the airlines to ensure all the touch points are being measured. And there is a consumer protection regulations to ensure that your rights are preserved. But that is aftermath, and we would like to do it proactively before the complaints happen.
And I must say, as a user, the public sector services in the airport, be it customs or passports, yani way ahead of the private. So, of the last 2 years, to be honest. No lines at any passport, and I'm sure all of you, a lot of you traveled here today. Custom inspection, seamless, all digitized. It is just embarrassing for the private sector to try to catch up, honestly.
You mentioned most of the pillars of the aviation strategy. You mentioned the sustainability, the safety and security. But what about the key pillar or enablers for the strategy, which is the human capital? Is there anything within GACA strategy about the human capital and any mandates to be given on this industry?
طبعا هشام runs يعني HR في سعودي.
ما شاء الله. بالعكس, it's a very good question, and we are in the final stages of announcing the human capital plans. In order to grow, we need to have adequate training academies, flight simulators, and also we do want to grow, and we don't capture the value of training our people here. So we're expanding our Saudi Aviation Training Academy. We're introducing new academies as well. We're partnering with an international organization to provide the training capabilities here. Prince Sultan University is basically adding more simulators, 12 now I think the number, and expanding the course that they have into a college of space and aviation. So we do have a blueprint of the human capability plan. We know how many new pilots are required, how many air traffic controller, how many safety inspector, quality inspector, MRO technician. We've looked into all the critical positions, baseline, growth, natural growth, and gap. How are we sourcing the gap? How are we converting it into training opportunities to be presented to the private sector as well, where we can strengthening also the human capital. But it is the pillar, the cornerstone. Nothing of whatever I said will be achieved if there is no bright, young and Saudi girls and boys, and also the expats and the experts who are supporting us, which I like to call them the Saudis without passport, like John, who has been helping us overall along this strategy. So I think it is an integral part of our plan, and this is something that we will announce very soon as well.
And I think it takes us a lot of pleasure and honor. Saudia Cargo's announcements today were predominantly on training and development. So it's just, we're taking this to the, genuinely, we believe this is the most important pillar. We're working on aircrafts and what have you. We're working on all sorts of things. But the two big announcements we made today were on training and development.
Maybe just quickly on announcement, we've been talking about human capital, jobs and the likes. Mohammed, in breaking news, we had the Minister and the President announcing the inaugural State of Aviation report, the development led by your division. Can you just tell us a little bit about the motivations for doing that work, publishing that report?
So the motivation is an appreciation to a sector that has been brutally criticized. But it's a sector that employs a lot of people. It's a sector that connects people with people. It's a sector that allows trade. It's a sector that allows such wonderful forums to happen. It's a sector I can keep on for the next hour. So it's an appreciation of how vital and important aviation is to the global economy and to the local economy. Second is an awareness that I would like people to also see how are we progressing in aviation. How did we grow? By how much? In which region? How many jobs are we creating? How much tourism contribution to the economy supported by aviation? How many tourism jobs supported by aviation? And the number of jobs was around 1 million, out of which 700,000 for tourism and around 300,000 for direct and indirect for aviation, or 250. Similarly for the GDP contribution, $50 billion, out of which $20 billion for aviation, $30 billion for tourism. And we work in harmony. And again, this is another reason why should we collaborate. There is no travel without tourism. There is no tourism without travel. It goes hand in hand, and the tourism can expand to business, religious, VFRs, etc. Third, maybe it's marketing also for the new graduates to join our sector, to see how significant, how important, how resilient. Like, we had the worst shock in the history of aviation, yet we're growing in just 2-3 years. And we showed the world that this sector is resilient, this sector is here to stay. And we would like to have it as an employer of choice. The aviation sector is an employer of choice for all the new graduates. So that's another reason why we published this report. And maybe for the investors who are wondering where to invest, I think the sector is in a trajectory and in a growth line. So it might be a good time to invest in aviation.
Brilliant. And I do know you're leading the inaugural Aviation Investment Showcase with a stellar lineup of speakers tomorrow, actually in this room at 12 p.m. So if anyone is interested about finding out about the investment opportunities here in the Kingdom, please come here tomorrow. I feel like we could probably have this discussion for another hour, but I'm conscious the clock is winding down. So maybe just to finish, one quick question for both of you. I'll start with you first, Loe. I mean, what are you most excited about in terms of the future of Saudi aviation, particularly for Saudi cargo?
No, I think everything is exciting, honestly. The country is exciting, the region is exciting, competition and the responses from competition is exciting. Collaboration, open and candid discussions are exciting. So my team, Saudi Cargo team, we have a big delegation here today, and this is the comment they told me, and I spoke to Muhammad about it. It's like a happy place. They usually go to these conferences and there are, but it's a happy place. It's people who want to do business, and from many friends and colleagues who come from abroad, they come and they say, we come and have a burst of energy, and then we go back to where we were, because it's not the same everywhere around in the world. And I think happiness is contagious, vision is contagious, clarity is contagious. We have learned from where Dubai had in the GCC, and we've all looked at it and said, you know what, it's doable. And we are hopeful in these times that the rest of the world will look at the GCC and say, you know what, they're doing it. The results are there. Muhammad mentioned a very important point about the collaboration. The busiest route in the world today, two of the busiest routes are Riyadh, Dubai, and Jeddah, Dubai. It's not hurting anybody. So I am excited to see this vibe and this energy and this critical thinking and this honesty and transparency and candidacy really spread to where we work around the globe. And I think this is a duty that we also have to carry ourselves as we operate all around the globe.
Brilliant. And for you, Mohammed?
Maybe quickly 3 points. First, I'm very excited to work with likely-minded people like Loy, brilliant guy, and I would love just working with him. Second is the huge and massive, tremendous growth potential that is ahead of us. And 3 is the impact that we as individuals can make and can contribute in building our own legacies And we're lucky to be here at this time, honestly.
Brilliant. Well, we'll finish on that note. Thank you very much, Loe and Mohammed, and thank you everyone for your questions. If you do want to get a copy of the inaugural State of Aviation report, it is just outside as you exit the doors, but otherwise please do enjoy the rest of the forum. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone, ladies, gentlemen. It is my absolute pleasure and delight to introduce today this fantastic panel regarding emerging threats in aviation. I have to say that I feel particularly honored to have, I believe, the most gender-balanced panel of the whole entire event here. And even though it's the most gender-balanced one, I feel that we still miss more women in here and at the conference in general. So without much more delay, I would like to start by introducing our fantastic contributors today. We have a huge diversity here, both in terms of origins, of experience, and being French, I'll start with the ladies. We have here, to my left, Musarello Barry. Musarello Barry is one of the very, very few head of civil aviation authorities on the planet who is also a woman. We have less than 10 on the planet. And it's a true honor to have you with us today. I know that the journey has been quite demanding with lots of hours on the plane, and she just made it on time.
Indeed.
Musarello is a true aviation person with a lot of experience, practical experience in security, in aviation security. She was in charge of a security company, dedicated aviation security company, before joining the Civil Aviation Authority, where she has to face interesting challenges in West Africa and in this changing world. So welcome very much.
Thank you.
Musarello. We have another former head of Civil Aviation Authority here who is joining us today. Tatevik Revadian. So you are no longer the head of the Civil Aviation Authority of Armenia, but not only were you one of the very few women with such a position, when you were appointed, you were also the youngest Civil Aviation Authority director on the planet. So you are today part of the top management of a firm that looks at aviation security, particularly in the technology area. So thank you very much for being with us here. It's an honor. And with no particular order, I will continue with, where is he? Wael Cannon. Wael is the Senior Vice President of Thales, in charge of cybersecurity. I have to say that everybody here has a CV that's so impressive that I don't even know where to start. I feel humbled when I looked at doing the background security check, as we all should be doing in aviation. A list of patents and a list of publications on aviation and cybersecurity and blockchain that I'm sure will be of very high interest to the members here of this panel. I would like to continue with Dee Waro, who is the General Managing Director of cybersecurity for IBM. No?
Travel.
Travel.
So all the aviation and airlines, travel and transportation.
Global Travel, Transportation and Consumer Industry, IBM Managing Partner. So thank you very much. You were immersed in travel and technology for many, many years, having worked at United Airlines, Amtrak, and many others. And so thank you very much for being with us here all the way from America. And finally, for today, I would like to introduce Captain Fawaz Al-Shamari. Captain Fawaz Al-Shamari has a very interesting background, being a former naval pilot in Saudi Arabia, with a tremendous experience on the safety side of the industry, and with some very interesting views on the relationship between safety and security. And he's today at the helm of the safety department at the Civil Aviation Authority of Saudi Arabia. So I would like, again, to welcome all you very much, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we are here today to talk about emerging threats in security threats in aviation. In a few words, I think that we are looking at a world that's changing very much. Until 10 years ago, we were still in a security realm that was completely inherited from 911. Security was about showing big guns or metal detectors, taking passengers at the airport through very intricate procedures, as well as cargo. And in the past 10 years, what do we see? We see that the security threats to aviation are becoming very different. They have moved from something that's easy to apprehend, like people and cargo, to drones, to cybersecurity, to all these threats that are just less easy to apprehend as for civil aviation authorities, for the general public too, and for the traveling public in general. So I would really like you today to help us understand what these emerging security threats are. Number one, what are we talking about? Number two, what can we do about it? And number three, how can we organize the response to these threats? So maybe I will ask each of you to give maybe some thoughts about those elements, and then we'll get started with the discussions. For everyone here in the room, please feel free to ask questions. This needs to be an interactive panel. So let's take the best out of it. Maybe Wael, would you like to start?
Yes, sure.
Thank you.
So maybe I'll start tackling the question from cybersecurity perspective, because that's my specialty right here. I think today the aviation sector globally is going through major digital transformation, which is great news because it increases the efficiency, the user experience. It enables many features and services and that were never imaginable even like 15 years ago. The other side of that coin is that because of this digital transformation, this give exposure to a series of threats that were not, let's say, very relevant before in the past, which are cybersecurity. And these need to be like carefully handled. I think it's still an opportunity. We need definitely to continue to the digital transformation while keeping in mind, yes, I'm embracing the digital transformation, but I need to keep an eye on the cybersecurity threats. Recently, what we've seen is like an increase in sophistication or the volume of the attack. So maybe a few observations that we've seen since, especially post-COVID, with the recovery of the aviation sector, clearly the number of cyber attacks or the attempts to do cyber attacks increased double digit, which is quite normal because with the recovery of the aviation. Another interesting observation, at least what we've seen, is that cyber attacks is now targeting the full, let's say, ecosystem of the aviation. So what I'm talking about, the airlines, which still around 60% of the attacks, but we are seeing attacks now on the ANSP or the air traffic control and the airports. So like threats starting to see and to target all the other, let's say, stakeholders of the aviation. Geographically speaking, we see kind of as well like it's a worldwide phenomena where roughly 35% of attacks are in Europe, 20 in North America, 20 in APAC, and roughly 15% in Middle East and Africa. So it's not anymore like a certain geography issue. And maybe to conclude last but not least, the sophistication of the attacks. Before it was like simple attacks to target the information system or the website of a certain company. But now more and more we see like what we call elaborate attack. The latest attacks, I think it was the airport of Beirut, where The attack targeted critical systems, including luggage systems, public announcement system, public information system, which kind of impacted the operation of the airport for more than 2 full weeks. So, and we need to keep aware of that.
No, very interesting. Thank you very much, because you said that you were talking about cybersecurity.
Sure.
And you said it's an emerging threat, but it's also a global threat.
Yeah.
So we need to look at these matters globally. Tadevik, you had this experience from the civil authority standpoint, and now looking at the solutions, some of the solutions. What's your initial take on these emerging threats?
Well, one of the issues that we see is there's an increasing number of cyber attacks. We see an increasing number of drones. We see more advanced weapon systems available, also with non-state actors. So there are certainly different types of risks that we haven't been used to dealing with, particularly regarding overflight risk. So in that sense, and it's quite a recent development, and we don't have the resources to deal with many of these issues. One thing is whether we have the technical capabilities to deal with it. That's one side of the story, but having the technical capabilities is not enough. You also need the human resources to deal with these issues, and that is a huge problem. The way Osprey deals with it and the solutions, if we focus on that, is that we utilize open source intelligence. So, and we don't do it manually. Basically, it is the AI that goes in and scans more than 200,000 sources, understands where there is a threat to aviation, and specifically in aviation security issues, particularly overflight risk issues. Geolocates those events on the map, and most importantly, understands when there is a change in the data. So we have 9 years of data available, and the AI is able to understand when there is a change. A human cannot absorb that amount of data and at the same time understand when there is a change and make a decision timely enough. So basically what we do is the AI does the heavy lifting, and then you need humans to make the decisions. And we then have human analysts that are experts within their own fields, within aviation-specific securities. It could be people from defense that are advising and actually predicting certain risks in the future as well, so we can be better prepared.
Excellent, thank you very much. So we have emerging threats, but we also have emerging technologies to answer to some of these threats.
Correct.
That's going to trigger some questions I'll have for the regulators, because that's not easy to handle.
Mm-hmm.
Captain Fawaz, we were talking earlier about the relationship between security and safety. You are a safety specialist, but you believe very much in the need to answer to security threats. Can you tell us a bit more about this?
Exactly. There is an interface between the security threats and the safety risks. What starts as a security threat could lead to a safety risk. As an example, one of the emerging issues at certain regions in the world, especially around conflict areas, the GNSS interference. GNSS interference is simply an attack, using either jamming methods to jam the GPS signals or the GNSS signals, or spoofing, which is faking the signal sent to the aircraft, where the aircraft systems think that it is a GPS signal. This starts as a security threat, but the effect of it affects the safety of the aircraft and passengers. So in essence, many of the security threats could lead to safety risks. And as we discussed earlier, maybe security management systems, they lack the experience in the management of security threats. They haven't been dealing with the data analysis and mitigation like it is dealt with in the safety field. So this could lead to, when you integrate, especially in the industry, when you integrate the management systems, you could identify safety risks that you wouldn't be able to identify it otherwise if the security management system is separate, and which is indicated in the AKO annex, where you could integrate the safety and security management system together.
Yeah.
And these are the benefits of integrating both systems.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Dee, what's the take on IBM, one of the leading companies, technology companies on the planet, on these threats?
Well, it's a great question. As we've just talked about, threats are definitely increasing, especially in aviation, whether it be in the avionics or in the flight operations, which we've talked about a little bit. But it comes down to data. It really comes down to where is the data, how can I get access to it? The threats are around data from what we see, for making sure that we are ahead of the game. And right now it is all about leveraging AI to eliminate what events that are not real, right? So obviously you get a lot of events. You have to figure out what is real to respond or what is not. Currently, we have, of course, people and analysts doing that, but I think more and more you'll see AI take on that. I think the other one that I can represent today in particular is about my personal experience, just bringing good governance to security and making sure that this is a board issue. For those who are in here in a capacity that have fiduciary responsibility, it's critical to understand your risks and making sure you've got people on the board that understand that. So we're seeing about 30% of the people on boards that have that fiduciary responsibility actually understand and can talk about that and manage that risk. So I think it's an important piece to talk about governance as well. But those are some of the things that we see on the management information side at IBM.
Thank you very much. I think this is quite a critical element, and it relates to what you mentioned. We were talking about AI, we are talking about cutting-edge technology, and at the end of the day, we are talking about decision-making by humans. And so for this, we need proper governance and proper systems, human systems. Excellent. So we have, I'm turning to you today now. You are in charge of the Civil Aviation Authority. And we hear about these emerging threats that have some scary implications, talking about jamming of signals, taking aircraft, somewhere with really instructions that are not correct. But at the same time, your day-to-day obligations are still to maintain safety at the airports. You still have to maintain security at the airports. How do you manage the traditional approach to security in aviation with these emerging threats?
Thank you. I think it's a combination, because ultimately what happens in the airport, in the operation, is a reflection of your regulation and what you're trying to enforce. So I think as a regulator, we have a key role in making sure, number one, the principles are there in terms of the regulation, and that our inspectors are equipped with the skills and knowledge to execute. Because ultimately, when we're performing our oversight functions, we are there to make sure compliance, and that compliance is the underlying benchmark of safety and security. For me, what I find interesting is that in all of the submissions, we've mentioned the human element. And for me, the human element, though old, is very central and still an emerging threat. So reference to insider threat. Even in AI, humans are programming machines. In airport infrastructure, most of the functions are being performed by human beings. So it's very important to look at, number one, background checks of people and, those that have access to airport facilities, sensitive areas, and make sure that, we're applying measures like behavioral detection, that we are engaging, and there's a huge element of instinct involved in detecting issues and finding possible solutions. So I think ultimately as a regulator, you're there to make sure you have the policies in place, but what's good for us is that we have a direct responsibility also on the actual implementation on the ground. So it's a twofold approach. And I think lastly, I'd like to comment that in overcoming these emerging threats, we have to have a multi-sectoral approach with the security sector, with intelligence, and that's how we're going to have a comprehensive strategy, I would say, because it's going to continue changing. We're not going to have one solution today. So I think that's the approach I think would be the most sustainable.
Thank you very much. So that's critically interesting because we were talking about safety and security, and what I get from this panel, we're talking about emerging threats, we're talking about technology, we're talking about human resources, and we're talking about regulations and procedures. Captain Fawaz, isn't this like the basis of the response to safety? We all know our safety models with our lines of defense, technology.
Exactly.
Human resources.
Yeah, these are the basic barriers for preventing any disaster to happen. So yes, it is essential. And to cap on what was said previously, AI is a good solution, but also it is vulnerable to the same things that other systems are vulnerable to, cyber security attacks. By modifying the data, you get different results. So I think the human element is critical in this equation. When I started my aviation career, in the beginning of my flying, the machines that I flew were conventional instrumentation. And as we progressed, technology was introduced slowly to it. And with technology, you get a reliance from the human element into technology. So you lose some of the skills required. And lately we have seen so many accidents caused by technology. And when you look at the root causes of that, you look at basic human skills in aviation, training, processes and procedure, lack of processes and procedures. And it is going to get more critical, because at this point, most of the pilots, young generation, they are used to new technology, doing everything for themselves. So you're losing the element of the older generation whom had the experience in conventional methods. When technology fail, they go back to conventional methods in aviation. But with newer generation, it is essential to teach them the conventional ways as a backup for the new technologies. Right now, it's just a matter of a cyber attack, and your whole system shut down, or maybe some more advanced attacks, electromagnetic waves that fries your system, or so many other things that could affect your system and leaves you to your fate. If you know what to do conventionally, you might survive. If not, so training is a very important part of the equation, and focusing on the human factor.
Can I just pick up on that? Because I think I always say, similar with security, if all else fails, open the bag, pat someone down. And this is, again, going down to the raw skills. And
Yes.
we run the risk of sometimes being over-digitalized and losing focus on the fundamentals. And I think both safety and security have those fundamentals that we should maintain despite our evolution into technology.
Yeah. Well, what do you think of that? You are a technology provider, both on the flight control systems in a way, and at the same time, cybersecurity protection.
Correct.
What's your take on this one?
So I would like to agree with what you said. Even in cybersecurity, let's not, because similarly to safety and to security, even in cybersecurity, we always say it's not only technology issue. It's the same three pillars: technology, processes or governance, and people. You can buy the best cybersecurity technology in the world, but behind it, if you don't put the right processes to operate it, it will fail. And if you don't have the right people to maintain and to operate, it will fail. So same for cybersecurity. It's not only about technology, but for the processes and the people. Another thought is regarding cybersecurity is what we call in Thales cybersecurity by design. The best way and the easiest way to implement cybersecurity is the start of any, let's say, design, whether we are designing a new system, you are designing a new service, you are opening a new facility, a new airport. Because if you consider cybersecurity as an afterthought, it will cost 10 much more than doing it initially from start with the right approach and the right processes. And this being said, once we implement, let's say, cyber by design, so as soon as possible, think about cyber. Keep in mind, cybersecurity by design is not like a permanent state. Cybersecurity, intrinsically, it will degrade over time. It needs to be maintained. So that's why we call it as well cyber through operation. Cybersecurity degrades over time for simple reasons. You have new attack techniques coming up, new attack threats or actors coming, human vulnerabilities, human errors. All these mix of things makes any system degrade over time unless we operate it through cyber, let's say, by operation. And my last statement, and here I'm repeating what Dee said, but I want really to insist on it, to have someone responsible, accountable, he has the right responsibilities and the right resources to deploy the cybersecurity of your strategy, of your organization, basically.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tadevik, you are working for a firm that does, as I just mentioned, using emerging technologies to answer to emerging threats. And you mentioned AI. Is this going to help us understand ahead of time what the threats are going to be?
Both ahead of time, but also in real time. Let me give a real-time example based on what you also mentioned. So GPS disruptions are a huge problem. We can all agree on that. The issue with GPS disruptions is you cannot necessarily predict exactly where they will happen, but if you know real time where they're happening and you have a flight that you need to conduct, at least you can inform your crew about that area being disrupted so they can be prepared and trained to deal with the situation at hand during the flight, use the right procedures during the flight. But if they're not aware of it and they're conducting the flight and they get surprised, they might not even be aware that the issues are arising due to that. And that brings a whole other range of dangers and issues to deal with. So that's on the real-time side. On the preventive side, I think a lot of people would be surprised that that you can actually predict a lot of these geopolitical disruptions going on. Overflight risk can be predicted. We've always looked at our industry, been very good at gathering data on safety-related issues, but when it comes to security, we always have this approach that, well, I can't. It's an external factor. I can't deal with it. It has nothing to do with me. As soon as it happens, I will have a crisis management plan in place. But instead, it's actually possible to see when you have open sources, and I'll give a couple of examples. If you know that a conflict is about to arise somewhere in the world, well, you can look at civilian aircraft, if they're being put into a holding position outside of an airspace. You can look at data showing military aircraft movements, whether there is a significant increase. You can look at fire data. There's so much. When you overlay that information on top of each other, you get quite a clear picture of what's going on in the world. And instead of being shocked and having to deal from a crisis management point of view, you can suddenly plan for these things. You can't avoid them, but you can plan around them. So from an airline perspective, instead of doing diversions that cost a lot of money, you can avoid those diversions. You can avoid those cancellations by being better prepared.
So it's about preparedness and emergency response. As you mentioned, you're working for IBM in the whole travel industry, not only aviation. Are the threats different for the other elements of the travel industry, or is aviation just part of it? Is it at the same level? Are there some elements that are specific to aviation in the way you look at those emerging threats?
Yeah, clearly the threats are, if you go by segment, whether it be rail, whether it be hospitality or others, clearly there are going to be threats that are slightly different, but it still comes back to the same, right? Particularly around the technology side of it is around data. How am I protecting my data? What are the processes that I have? How do I employ AI to make sure that I truly understand what's a threat, what's not? Because I mean, it's on the order of magnitude of 97, 98% of events coming in are not relevant, and they can take you away from what is really a threat, right? So how do you get AI? But I definitely see, other threats coming through, and on the horizon you have other technology-based threats. I'm not so certain, how many people understanding of what quantum computing will bring to this, right? Right now we currently have encryption methods that are very important, that keep us safe today around your data. But the future, when you have a quantum computer that can immediately break, a 2048-bit RSA token and an algorithm on that with a computer, probably we're thinking about 2026, maybe 2030, that will immediately break these. You have to look at new forms of encryption without getting in the details. But my point is, these are always going to be ongoing threat. You'll see AI continue to make inroads to this. We are fans of open source. We just actually open source all of our own language models around this to making sure there's an open approach to this. But we definitely are seeing threats no matter what segment you're in. Clearly, there's threats on the horizon with new types of technology that all of a sudden will change the landscape. But the key is about how you respond, understand. And I'll say one last thing is we actually provide training and what we call tabletop exercises, right, with companies that truly say, okay, I have a situation. We actually just went with one last week where we have someone that had taken some data. And how do you respond to that? So if you're in the executive suite, if you've ever had a tabletop exercise, we call it our CyberX range, we would be happy to then go through a scenario about how you deal with that, because not everybody is prepared, even if they think they are.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Musayero, you said something very interesting, the perspective of the regulator. You need to ensure that your aviation system is compliant. That's your role, right? When you listen to them, these technology companies that are telling us about these threats, what's your reaction? Do you actually want to pick up your phone and call them to say, hey, help me? Or would you think, I need to talk to my neighbors and to the industry players to look at how to have regulations evolve to answer to those threats? What's your reaction on this?
I think definitely for me, the initial response is engagement with colleagues and CAs and industry, experts, because, like you said, where you're applying those regulations is where you need to get insight from. So we're very big on, MOUs and sharing technical expertise in working groups that share ideas around new concepts such as cybersecurity. And I think it's very important for a regulator to be on top of training, on top of capacity building, because it's all about equipping your staff with the ability to deliver. So when we have these new scenarios and these emerging threats, you always have to be forward thinking. I'm glad we've talked about preparedness, because I think it's one thing as well that we talk about, but in reality, how many simulations are done around activities of, security concern or safety concern. And I think as a regulator, that's one of the things as well I think we should try to push for more. Until a scenario happens, you don't know how you're going to respond. We saw that with COVID. And even post-COVID now, how much of those lessons have we really incorporated into our regulations, into our systems? So it's about internalizing and making sure we get the output.
So thank you very much. So that means that, Tativik, you're not ready to get a phone call from
Not just
yet.
Not yet.
So, but what do you do? So to get this phone call, that means that you need to get these threats into the regulation somehow. Who do you speak with? Do you do that? Do you speak with the regulators to?
So as a former regulator, of course, I would really want that, because particularly as a young person like Barry as well, inside a regulator, you realize that there's so many processes that could be done so much more efficient if technology was being used. But these institutions have never been used to it, and the people working there, it's so far from their everyday life that it's very difficult to bring that transformation. So we are very interested, and we do work with regulators. We work with EASA, for example. We built the conflict zone hub for EASA, which means that European states, when they need information on overflight risk, are using that platform that is powered by Osprey. But if we talk on more individual level, particularly smaller CAAs, those are really difficult to get into, because first of all, there's a lack of knowledge that, and partially it's also our mistake that we exist, so we need to be better at informing. But the next step is that even if you have someone who gets excited about it, bringing that into the organization and ensuring that processes are changed internally to benefit from the data, I think that's the challenge. It's not, yes, you can sign up for and receive the data, but how do you actually ensure that your staff uses them and uses them efficiently in their decision making? That's the biggest challenge. And so far, the CAs are the most difficult ones to deal with on this issue.
Captain Fawaz, what do you think about this?
I'm a big supporter of systems, because without systems, you're not going to have accurate data. If you're running everything in your authority manually, you lose a lot of stuff. If it is systemized through smart systems, from end to end, then you get clean data, you get accurate data. And, this is the most important thing in data analysis, is to get accurate data. But we have to consider each state's capability to provide these systems. So I think it is an international obligation. The aviation system is a whole system. Aircrafts fly across borders. The security threats safety risks fly with these aircrafts cross borders. So I think it's an obligation on the international community and the ICAO and also on the leading authorities to support smaller states to develop their systems. Sharing the data and safety is essential. And through my interaction, whether it's with other regulating bodies or OEMs, industry, they tend to hog data. They don't want to share it. They think if they share data, they lose power, they lose
protectionism.
Protection, yeah. So it is essential for, and I think this is an ICAO role to manage this, where we enhance the level of safety at each state. Currently, we have very advanced leading authorities, and we have, smaller states with less capability. They have weaker systems, and these weaker systems, they produce threats to the other states and the leading authority countries. So it is wise, I think, to share responsibility, share knowledge, share experience, promote support to less fortunate states, and support them in building their systems. But I'm a very big supporter of systemizing data.
Tatevik, you wanted to interject?
Yeah, just to add on, like on the overflight risk topic, I need to be very honest with everyone. Even very, very well-developed governments around the world are not able to provide timely enough information on overflight risk, and sometimes accurate information as well on overflight risk, because, and you can't even blame them, because there's a clear conflict of interest. If you're a government and you have your political agenda that you need to deal with, it is very difficult to share this honest information with the industry, even though you know that the industry is following you in every step that you're taking. And this is why it's so important that both for smaller CAAs, but also for airlines to understand, yes, we should follow, we should know what's going on, what's being published, but not only relying on a single source, having access to your own data. And I think this is a very interesting time period in life, because, well, a small CAA could also access the data that the big countries are having. So it completely can shift the whole power mechanism as how things are working today.
That's very interesting, and I'm going to give you the some time on this, because what I hear here is that on the one hand, in security, aviation security, we are at a very incipient stage of data sharing that's absolutely critical to make the system better. And what we hear today in aviation security, it seems to me, is what we used to hear many years ago in aviation safety. Yes. Aviation safety was like, no, we cannot, it's confidential information, we cannot touch it. Today in the world, we have an aviation safety system that relies extraordinarily on the exchange of information that not that long ago was considered completely confidential. And I know you probably wanted to get on this, but I was going to ask you the question, thinking of this information and all your clients at ABM, how do you mix these requirements, this need to improve security and the requirements in terms of data protection of your clients?
Yeah, it's a great question. In following up, though, I do think that we have this governance issue about transparency, right? Because nobody is motivated to say, when I've had an attack, to say, yes, I had an attack. It's embarrassing. There's a lot to it. Now, governments have done a great job at policies, and otherwise that if you are under attack, then there's issues. But one of the things I wanted to bring up is about, for instance, finance. If you take finance from a governance perspective, almost all entities, public companies in particular, have auditors, right? And one of the approaches that I've now taken twice, and we recommend this on the board, again, I'll go back to the board and governance, is how do you make sure, so if you've got an organization with security that's coming and saying, here's what I think my risk is, how do you balance that? Because you're not in the details, you may not understand. So having auditors to be able to understand what is best practice, what is not, where do you fall, just like finance, right? Where you come in, we have quarterly reports. This is a very important piece from a governance perspective. You have two sets of eyes, so to speak, in making sure. Now, that's one. The other is, if you have an issue, you have to bring it up. I mean, some of these, you've seen people, I mean, we've had airlines in Europe and in the US that because of cybersecurity have screeched to a halt. Multi-million-dollar type issues. Some of you have seen this. These are real threats you just can't hide, right? And I think most of us around the room have now received some of that letter to say your data has been exposed. Here is the credit bureau that you can go to make sure you have protection with that, right? This is just this is a daily occurrence. But I would say making sure you've got multiple sets of eyes on this from a governance perspective, and just if you don't have, and I'll, for the audience here, if you don't have people on your board that can help you through this process, make sure you hire the likes of people that really understand this, can bring that angle to it. Very important.
Thank you very much. You are we are almost getting to the end of this panel, and you are introducing the word finance into it. And that's something I'd like to ask my panelists about, about. Your clients are governments a lot. When we talk about governments, that means budget. We talked about transparency. And you come to them with solutions. And do they have the budget for it? How does that work? Do you get a call because they already had a problem? Or do you get a call who say, we have a plan, we have a budget, and we want you to do something about it?
Well, I mean, it's not like black and white. You have the various types of organization. Some of them are quite mature, so this is good news, where they are aware of the risks, so they are like really risk-driven, and they are not even, we have examples of clients, without mentioning names, they want to be ahead of regulations, and they want to do exactly what Dee mentioned. I want to audit myself. I want to have these new set of eyes checking inside, and wants to be ahead of, let's say, the regulation, because I want to make sure everything is fine. And you have the other part of the spectrum where basically they are somehow even not aware of the challenge, not aware of the problems, and God forbids, but as long as they don't have any big issue today, they are kind of in this waiting area. That's why I believe, like in any other domain, even in finance, you have the risk appetite and you need to mitigate the risk, and you have the regulations. And at some point, regulations, or at least best practices, should be elaborated and should be published. And the good news about this is that this has started already. Today, there are initiatives at FAA or EASA to create these kind of cybersecurity guidelines. We have some industry cyber experts like Aviation ISAC or the European Air Traffic Management CERT that wants to start pushing these for these kind of, maybe not necessarily regulation yet, but at least practices and guidelines so that the ecosystem can use. And last but not least, we should not forget this. In every country, aside from, let's say, the aviation regulator, more and more you have these, let's say, cybersecurity regulator and cybersecurity agency. Here in KSA, we have the NCA. In France, we have the ANSI. In UK, we have the NCSC. And these cyber agencies, today, they prepare regulation regarding cybersecurity for critical infrastructure. Not necessarily aviation, but at least they are expecting some characteristics and some rules to be applied whenever it's about a critical infrastructure, and needless to say, aviation is a critical infrastructure. So this is kind of like another source of guidelines and regulation that at some point we need to implement.
You're opening another fascinating door, I can tell you, for doing some work in different countries with governments. I was in the situation of talking to governments where the Agency for Cybersecurity did not know, was not aware that aviation was an element to take into account, creating some interesting issues. Before asking each of you to provide us with some closing remarks, I would really like, our gate today has been extraordinarily quiet. So I would love to maybe take some questions or comments, please.
Very interesting. Thank you very much, panelists. It's really a very interesting topic, yet very threatening. I'm, by the way, Abdullah Al-Qadhi from Bahrain CAA, Director of Aviation Safety and Security. The various parts that I wanted to intervene and just provide some, to underline, were covered by the panelists. For example, the National Cybersecurity Center that we have in Bahrain provides both financial and technical support to various entities. The other part, I'll just go back to what Captain mentioned earlier, the human factor, that the more you rely on systems and AI, the more you're vulnerable to failure. I've just read an article recently about a flight that the new generation pilot was lost because he lost the system. He didn't know even how to fly it. And luckily, it landed safely. However, in that article, it says that the part related to training pilots on manual flying is kicking in again, which is good. One more thing, I'll not take longer from your time. Contingency planning is a key. Resilience is another one. So we just hope experts like you guys just enlighten us more and more about this. I know that ICAO is working on this. It's under the USAP CMA framework standards of Annex 17, I believe. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. I think maybe here before. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Richard Willis from Osprey, so with Tatovic, so I'm going to make some shameless comments in a moment, so apologies for that. The first thing, I just actually had the same viewpoint with the good captain here, that actually I'm not sure that using technology actually increases your vulnerability, but certainly changes it.
Yeah.
But with the captain's point there that actually I think GPS interference and spoofing is a great example of our over-reliance sometimes on technologies, and that actually those traditional instrumentation, traditional flying techniques remain critical. And so actually it's having that sort of technological solution integrated with the human interface as well. So I think that's really important to retain that and having that sort of human oversight. But excuse my slightly robotic delivery of this point. I'm actually after an opinion from the panel. So we've got sort of technological AI and machine learning and data-led solutions available, and in particular for the last 6 or 7 years on overflight, near or over conflict zones, and also with many other risk types too. But given this sort of automation available for flight planning, risk assessments, and the monitoring of these flight plans, does the panel have a view on when you think that AVSEC risk assessments should be mandatory and that monitoring should be mandatory as well, given the technologies are available? There was talk about this pre-COVID, but I'm not currently aware of a target date to see this in place.
I don't know if we have this answer on the panel, or maybe not. You know, when I was requested to be here with you on the panel, I felt like a fraud, knowing that my friend here, Sylvain Lefoyer, who is actually heading aviation security and facilitation for ICAO, was going to be in the room. So maybe he has the answer. I'm sure he has the answer, maybe other comments.
Thank you very much, Jean-Marc. Sylvain Lefoyer, Deputy Director, Aviation Security and Facilitation in ICAO, also in charge of cybersecurity. Very interesting panel. I took a lot of notes, and I will come back to you to have some answers. We don't have the work under process to make it mandatory to have this watch reporting and oversight of this stuff. But risk management is at the core of everything we do in ICAO, be it safety or security. So states are called to have this risk assessment and risk management. So are airlines, airports, operators. But I wanted to have a quick question on culture. We are talking about safety, security. Safety culture is embedded in the airport air industry for a long time. We are starting with security culture, but when it comes to cross-cutting issues like you are discussing today, how do you make safety culture and security culture interact? Because someone good in safety with a good safety culture may not be sensitive to security threats. So we need to have this cross-cutting approach between safety and security. What about that?
Maybe Captain Fawaz, you have some views on this.
I think, especially in security aspects, the culture depends on the country that you're talking about. Each country have different view about security. What is sensitive information in one country when it comes to security is not in other countries. So it depends on each country and how they build their own security culture. I'm not in the security field, but it is important to build and promote the security threat understanding among not just the industry, but also among the passenger public who board the aircraft. And I think it's done in some ways, by the airlines, but it's not a systemic approach. They need, it needs to be led by the authority.
No, excellent. Thank you very much. And I like very much your point regarding security culture is different in every country. Just a short anecdote. I was actually conducting a safety audit for ICAO, looking at baggage handling. And I had the audacity of taking a picture of the baggage handling system, and I was arrested by the security of the airport.
Yeah.
So, yes. Please.
Yes, good day all. My name is Antonio Clark, Director of Civil Aviation, ABSEC and Facilitation of Civil Aviation Already Bahamas. The gentleman from Osprey, that was an excellent, excellent point about the risk assessments relative to the cyber, because a lot of times in traditional risk registers is not something that's incorporated, and especially when Ms. Barry mentioned about the insider risk. This question is for the cyber experts. Outside of what Captain Fawaz said about the attacks on the GNS, the ANSP attacks from a cyber perspective, what have you been saying? Because the fine gentleman here mentioned the CERT at the ASA, right? For me to advise the CERT back in the Bahamas when I return about attacks on ANSPs, what should I inform them of, one? And two, from an AR perspective, I'll combine the comments made by Captain Fawaz and DG Barry in terms of, we know that technology improves itself and doubles itself at a minimum every 2 years. It improves, the dynamics of it is exponential. Have you seen, or when would you estimate bad actors to have access to AI to actually spoof your AI?
Okay, maybe I'll start answering.
Please go ahead.
And I'll start with the second question. Actually, we started already to see attackers leveraging AI techniques today. There is like a taxonomy of cyber attacks targeting, let's say, I don't want to call them weaknesses, but the characteristics of AI. You have categories like data poisoning or other types of attacks. And there are even like proof of concepts, not necessarily maybe for the aviation, but I'm talking more like data analytics and AI. There are proven attacks where you kind of trick your system, especially in the learning phase, and then you feed him like poison data so that you can alter the expected behavior. So, I mean, luckily we didn't see this kind of attacks fully in real life, at least to the best of my knowledge, but it started already, and very advanced proof of concept exists already on that.
Any other answer for the first question?
I have a question to that. Mitigating measures. I mean, that's really serious.
Yeah.
We're starting to see it. Are there any real life mitigating measures that we can implement now?
Yeah, so yeah, luckily, I mean, researchers already started to tackle that because, I mean, the good part of the story is that some of the attacks have been implemented and demonstrated by researchers and not like by rogue entities. And definitely researchers highlighting these kind of attacks to start thinking about the solutions. And depending, of course, of the categories, but it boils down to data security and supply chain security and algorithm security. So data security, you need to secure the data and make sure whatever is injected to your AI model is what is kind of like valid data. Supply chain, which means that during the supply process or chain, you know and you master each part, and you know there is no like external component, whether it's software or hardware, is being injected. And algorithms, to make sure that your algorithm is resilient to some rogue information or poisoned information, of course, to a certain level. So yeah, I mean, long story short, yeah, security measures. And maybe to conclude, I mean, I didn't even yet fully read it, but I know the ANSSI, so the French cyber agency, basically governmental agency, had already published kind of like a white paper and guideline for cybersecurity for predictive AI.
Quick question, I know we're out of time, but, or not question, but comment on this is, look, technology with Moore's Law will continue to improve, but bad actors will also find ways. We're talking about things that are good and safe, but you always, I'll go back to my original comment, you always need to find a way to stay ahead and validate yourself, and I use the term auditors, of understanding of where you sit. Because if you actually have a responsibility to a board, to shareholders, whatever, on security, then you are scared because literally one event away from disaster. So the question you should be thinking, that I've thought of a few different times, is what am I doing to keep ahead of everything? Am I doing the best we can? Validating that with others is very, very important. But look, all of these details, there are plenty of, if you were actually asking the technologists around cryptography or other, there's lots of different threats. But I just want to make sure it's very clear to stay ahead. But also, bad actors, we need to make sure that a world is not facilitating, supporting, funding bad actors as well.
Yes. Well said indeed.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would like 30 seconds closing remarks from each of you, taking advantage of the fact that we have regulators and industry players at the cutting edge of the response to these emerging threats. For the regulators, what do you tell your emerging threat solution providers today following this panel that you would like to hear from them? What do you need from them? And for the industry, now that you heard more about what the regulators need and face every day and what their needs are, what do you tell them that you can do better to respond to these needs? Maybe we start with you.
I think definitely information sharing and collaboration has to be at the center of it. I think regulators are now more open. I think we clearly see the need for that close collaboration. So I think it's more the encouragement for us all to engage, put aside protectionism, put aside all these barriers that we like to have over our own governance structures and our own regulations, and really delve into the issues and share those ideas. I think only then are we going to have, you know, not long-term solutions, but immediate, tangible steps.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think I'll just go back to my comment. truly that if you're a regulator, you have responsibility for security, safety, and obviously cybersecurity. I would just make sure that you believe at your core and your heart that you have done everything you can, including employing outside eyes. Just so important, because you may think that your own teams, your own groups are doing that, but you'll never be able to benchmark in others to understand where you may be having some sort of third eyes or auditors on that. Just critically important to make sure you've covered all the bases.
Thank you very much. Captain
I think cooperation, but for technical people in IT, I think simplifying how they explain things to authority. We're not as smart as we look, you know. So, you know, simplifying the solution, providing, you know, a proof of concept or a solution that fits to that regulator that they could understand might help.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tatevik.
Yeah, I want to touch upon the resource issue because this goes across government entities, airlines. Yeah, in general, we lack expertise. There are not enough people who know enough about these topics. Instead of looking at it in a traditional way, let's hire more people only and let's train them. Because even if we had 1,000 people that were trained to, for example, monitor open source, it would be mission impossible to do that heavy lifting manually. So the key message would be to make sure that we're not scared of using new technologies. Yes, there are threats, we need to deal with them, but not being scared. I've had a feeling that some people we speak to are thinking it's going to overtake their jobs, but it's not. It's actually just going to improve the quality of their jobs, because it is not possible for them to absorb all this information. So yeah, focus on what humans are good at, decision-making processes, and let technology do what it's good at while considering the risks.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe a last takeaway message for all these, let's say, for the entities of this ecosystem, just to make sure in your organization to have someone accountable. I do believe in the top-down approach. So having someone in your board, in your teams, responsible of cybersecurity, and giving him the right responsibility and resources through external auditors or whatever to do this kind of genuine assessment and create a roadmap to enhance the cybersecurity for your organization. That would be the takeaway message.
Oh, thank you very much, all. In a way, it's very comforting to hear human resources governance so much in a security panel with distinguished experts at the latest in technology. And at the same time, we see the need to provide an industry response to come together as a community looking at security. So I just want to thank you, each and every one of you, very, very much for your time, for being with us today. And hope that you enjoy Riyadh and the rest of these fantastic events. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.